Previously on Anime T23's What If series, Naruto left the Leaf Village with Jiraya, embarking on a journey that would change his destiny forever. Through intense training and unexpected bonds, his path led to a surprising twist: love. During Naruto's training with Jiraya, he met a strange girl with strange abilities. During his time with this strange girl, he finds himself falling for her. The thing is, this girl isn't human, and with her possessive nature, well, Konoha and Akatsuki just better watch out, because this girl isn't giving up Naruto without a fight. Assassin's Creed elements. Join us as we delve deeper into Naruto's journey, where intense training and unexpected romance create an enthralling tale. This is Anime T23's What If Naruto Get Married During Jiraya Training Trip Part 2. The atmosphere was extremely tense as Naruto bit his lip in frustration and slight despair. He uncertainly looked onto the field and at the predicament he had placed himself in. Oh, why was Kami-sama torturing him with his mistake at the moment? You know, Naruto-kun, if you don't move, I'll be an old lady by the time you're done, Shiroi lazily said, as she stared at the blonde who was practically sweating under the stress he was under. Dang it, Naruto frustratingly said, as he continued to muse on his next move. Oh, for the love of Kami-sama, just make a move, Gaki, Jiraya shouted in an exaggerated manner, as he stared down at the game of chess the blonde and his lover were having. It had been an entire year since Naruto's first mission, and the night where Naruto and Shiroi became true lovers. After that night, Jiraya had immediately went into pervert mode, and asked for the specifics of the night. Naruto had merely blushed, and a glazed look entered his eyes, while Shiroi had a devilish smirk on her face. And the next morning their neighbors were complaining about noises that night. Jiraya didn't know what exactly happened, but they must have gone all the way, and for nearly all night, seeing as nearly the entire neighborhood was somewhat complaining about noises the entire night. Jiraya couldn't stop giving Naruto a grin for an entire day, which annoyed Naruto to no end, but he dealt with it. Since then, Shiroi has made it a point that she wouldn't go to sleep unless it's with her favorite blonde in the bed with her. So now Naruto and Shiroi have always shared a bed, never being away from each other unless the blonde was sent on a mission. Seriously, if the two weren't inseparable before, well, they were practically glued together now. They had no problem displaying public affections as well, holding hands, making out, a bit of groping here and there, all while having innocent looks on their faces. Jiraiya still didn't know how they could have such innocent faces when they groped each other. And then there were the marks that Jiraiya saw on both Shiroi's and Naruto's neck. When he asked what they were, Shiroi quickly explained the concept of the mate mark, as she called. The mark had several features. The first was obvious. It let people con that they were taken, and that both Shiroi and Naruto belonged to each other forever. The second was that it made them both a little bit stronger, and Jiraiya confirmed it when all of Naruto jutsu and his strengthened stronger by a small margin. Even Shiroi with her already monstrous strength got stronger. That slightly frightened the old sage. Seriously, with her natural strength, she almost as strong as Tsunade. Now her strength was truly on par with Tsunade. Jiraiya was a bit glad that the silvery white-haired vampire didn't train with them. If she had, there was no doubt in his mind that she would be a true juggernaut. The last and final thing the mark did was connect them in a sense. They would be able to feel each other's emotions and sense each other's thoughts. Not like mind reading, but more like they could get an idea of what they were thinking. Also, the mark connect their lives in a sense. If one dies or is close to death in a sense, then the other would instantly feel it. And should they die, the other will die with them. In a sense, it took the meaning till death do us to the freaking trash, and dumped it in a dumpster, seeing as they would die together and be together even in the afterlife. And finally, the mark let live just as long as their mate, meaning if one of them was immortal, then the mark would make so that the other would live just as long as their mate. That made Jiraiya snort a bit. He knew the lifespan of vampires were as long as at least 200 years. Not to mention the Uzumaki clan were famous for their incredibly long lifespan, being able to live for at least 400 to 500 years. The healthier the Uzumaki is, the longer they live. The oldest Uzumaki ever recorded was said to have lived for 700 years before he finally died. So Naruto could live for a good long time. Not to mention with the Kyuubi constantly keeping the blonde's body healthy. The blonde achieved in a sense what Orochimaru always dreamed of. Immortally, with the only way of dying being in battle. Jiraya told Naruto and Shiroi of this. The two were naturally both shocked beyond belief. Naruto was disheartened seeing as he would outlive all of his friends. Shiroi, sensing the blonde's turmoil, comforted him and said that she would be by his side no matter what. Naruto appreciated Shiroi's words and brightened up when he realized that Shiroi would live just as long as him. Jiraiya, despite the fact that his godson was basically immortal, was happy for the blonde. However, he quickly turned serious and claimed that this should be a closely guarded secret, because should some like Orochimaru hear of this, then they would stop at nothing to kidnap the blonde. Both Shiroi and Naruto grimly agreed and never brought up the topic again. And of course we can't forget the blonde's training. After 3 months, the blonde finally did it. He completed the Rasengan, and that made Jiraiya proud of what the blonde achieved. There were 2 versions of the completed Rasengan. The first was the wind-style Rasengan. The technique looks fairly similar to an ordinary Rasengan, except it has 4 small white blade-like protrusions surrounding it, making look like a miniature the concept of a completed wind style. Rasengan would be the rotation and power of the Rasengan, and Naruto's wind-natured chakra condensed into a stable sphere. Jiraiya immediately labeled it as a kinjutsu. The reason was simple. Not only did it attack on a molecular level, it damaged your own hand. Though it was a slow process, it would eventually destroy your ability to use chakra. Jiraiya, along with Shiroi, forbade Naruto from using the jutsu unless he somehow found a way to throw it. Naruto was a little disheartened by this. After all, it was an original technique he created, and now he couldn't even use it. However, when given the idea of throwing it, the blonde began to think and eventually decided to put the idea to the test. 2 months later, he proudly looked upon his newest version of the Rasengan, his newest and his most powerful jutsu, the Rasen Shuriken. The Rasen Shuriken was a larger version of the wind style Rasengan. The Rasen Shuriken was almost exactly like the wind style Rasengan, except not only was it larger and a bit stronger, it could also be thrown. Also, its longer spinning white blades madly spinning around made it look like a giant shuriken. Hence the name Rasen Shuriken. Another feature was that the blades themselves could expand. The blonde gave his new jutsu a test run and was pleased with the results. He immediately showed the fruits of his labor to Jiraiya and Shiroi, and the reactions were as he expected. Jiraiya looked utterly shocked, before a look of pure pride erupted from his face. He patted Naruto on the back and warmly said he did an excellent job. Shiroi, however, looked both amazed and incredibly happy for the blonde. She gave Naruto a deep kiss that lasted for several minutes. They quickly separated after they heard a perverted giggling. When they turned around, they saw Jiraiya writing in that damn notebook of his. Shiroi and Naruto merely looked at each other before they began to beat the perverted into a bloody pulp and burn that precious notebook in front of him. The perverted hermit cried out in despair at the loss of his notes. However, unknown to both Shiroi and Naruto, the notebook they burned was merely a fake one that Jiraiya switched with at the last second. Shortly after his completion of his Rasen Shuriken, the blonde took on more missions. However, the missions were not as interesting as he hoped. The missions were either B-ranked or a high-level C-rank. They mostly consisted of destroying some bandits, dealing with low-level missing Nin. To put simply, Naruto got bored of those missions after 6 months. He couldn't really complain. After all, at least he got missions to do. He would go crazy just sitting around just waiting for something to happen. So he just silently completed his missions quickly so that he could spend time with Shiroi. That was his routine. Wake up, train, do some missions, and then spend most of his time with Shiroi. On some occasions, he would enter his mindscape and speak with the Kyuubi. Of course, the Kyuubi was a bit hostile with him, but over time, with his visits, the Kyuubi began to warm up to him, if only slightly. though Naruto thought that he and the Kyuubi became pretty good friends, something that Kyuubi repeatedly denied. Though the giant demonic fox couldn't help but be glad that there was right in his observation. The Kyuubi did think of him as a friend and the son he never had, not that he would ever admit it. He was the cling of the Bija, damn it. He had a reputation to uphold. If his siblings found out about his relationship with the blonde, then he would be a laughingstock. Well, the Hachibi and the Nibi would be happy for the fox, but the others, they would never let him live it down, which was why the giant overgrown fox always made sure that the blonde would never mention their relationship with the other Jinchuriki. The blonde was a bit confused, but reluctantly agreed to the Kyuubi's terms. As a show of thanks, the Kyuubi offered to upgrade his hidden blade. Confused, the blonde asked how the hidden blade could be further upgraded. The Kyuubi explained that the hidden blade could be upgraded with various adaptations. As an example, the Kyuubi upgraded the blade so that a metal hook would extend from the bracer should he flick his hands to the left. The blonde tested it out, and to his surprise, a hook-shaped blade extended. The blonde's mind went spiraling with limitless possibilities at what he could do with the hook blade. He even tried out one of his ideas when he was on a mission dealing with some bandits. He had to admit, spinning around and grabbing a bandit with his hook blade, and then flinging them across the field was awesome. Kyuubi thought it was hilarious, and Altair merely pulsed in confusion at why Kyuubi was howling with laughter when that happened. The blonde's training in Kenjutsu had been getting along splendidly. Jiraya estimated that he was at least mid-level Kage in Kenjutsu. His Taijutsu was low-level Kage. However, it was his ninjutsu that was truly amazing, despite the fact that he only knew his own versions of the Rasengan and the limited jutsu he got from Yuzusho Gakure. The blonde was high-level Kage because of the power he could place in the jutsu. That also began to experiment with various weapons along the journey. He didn't like some weapons, some he liked, but never saw the point in mastering, seeing as they were really useful in battle. One weapon he enjoyed and had begun using was the rope dart. The rope darts consisted of long ropes about 3 to 5 meters long, with metal darts attached to one end. A dart was thrown with the opposite end of the rope anchored to an object, or held in one's free hand. There were many ways to use the rope darts. Either he could use them to literally drag an enemy to him if they're too far, or pulling them off trees so that they won't have the higher ground. However, Naruto's favorite way of using the rope dart was hanging an enemy from a tree or any other position. Kyuubi greatly enjoyed that method if the happy-go-lucky megawatt smile he had was anything by. The last and final weapon the blonde loved was the crossbow. He took off some bandit he randomly killed. He saw the weapon and gave a test run. He was pleased with the results and promptly kept it. He only used if a target was too far to hit with his throwing knives. He sealed all of the ammunition for the crossbow into a seal on the weapon, and an auto-reload seal on it. Basically, it allowed him to shoot a crossbow. All he had to do was channel chakra into the seals. And there you have it. An arrow would appear from the storage seal, while the auto-reload seal would reload the crossbow for him. That way he wouldn't have to use his hand if in a battle. The blonde had also gained a reputation. People didn't know who he was underneath his hood, but the main thing that made him identifiable was the gray colored robes he wore and the fox images on his bracers respectively, and of course his sword Altair. Seeing no other sword had an eagle's head as a pommel, and eagle wings as the guard. The nickname everyone had come up for the blonde was the Fox Assassin, because of the fox-like grin he would give his clients and the whiskers on his cheeks. The nickname pleased the Kyuubi. Altair pulsed in agreement, as the nickname suited his wielder. During some of his missions, the blonde had encountered some aspiring swordsmen, mainly rookie samurai. When they saw Naruto with Altair, they immediately proclaimed that a sword such as Altair shouldn't be in the hands of an honorable shinobi, and thus tried to forcibly take the blade. That ticked Naruto off. He wasn't give Altair to a bunch of low-level swordsmen, so he promptly handed their asses to them without so much as drawing Altair, since he didn't think they were worthy of gazing upon Altair's sliver blade. Altair pulsed in agreement, as it didn't want the blood of foolish swordsmen to stain its blade. After an entire year of missions, training, and weapons experimenting, Jiraya thought it was time to teach his young apprentice strategy. So for a few weeks he taught the blonde strategy and how it could save you and your comrades' lives. Of course, the perverted hermit knew that Naruto was the kind of person who made up plans and tactics on the fly. But one day, it wasn't gonna cut, which was why currently our blonde antagonist is playing chess against his lover. Hey, fuck you, Ero-sensei. Playing this game against Shiroi-chan is fucking difficult. Databao. Naruto shouted in frustration. Or maybe you're just an idiot, Jiraiya stated as he smirked at his student. Naruto fumed for a moment before he returned his attention to the board game when he heard Shiroi clear her throat. Shiroi gave Jiraiya a warning stare, silently telling not to rile up her blonde lover and unofficial husband. Jiraiya merely huffed, but gave a nonchalant shrug. He turned his attention back to the game of chess, when his godson moved his knight in a position that would let him capture Shiroi's king, should she move her own knight. Not a second after Naruto make his move, did Shiroi strike. Damn it, Kami-sama why? Naruto wailed as he stared at board game. It was inconceivable. How was this possible? Shiroi now had her pawn right into his knight's path. Now the only thing he could was move his king and a pawn. However, it didn't matter, because if he moved his king in any direction, then Shiroi would ultimately capture the king. In a nutshell, he fucked on all sides. Oh, what could he do? Either way, he lost. He had never felt so utterly defeated. Wait, maybe he could. Ha! Beat that Shiroi-chan, Naruto stated with a grin crossing his features. The reason? He had just placed his pawn in a position to capture one of her knights. However, his expression turned into utter despair when Shiroi merely moved her other knight to capture his king. Checkmate, Naruto-kun, Shiroi said, a victorious grin crossing her face. No, Naruto wailed. I just died a little bit inside. Naruto muttered. Shiroi had a deadpan expression on her face. Wasn't he taking this a little too seriously? Jiraiya merely frowned lightly. Oh, come on, Gaki. It can't have been that hard, he stated. The blonde merely glared at the toad Sanine. How about you try playing her in chess? Databao. Damn that verbal tick. Naruto shouted. Jiraiya smirked slightly. All right, Gaki. Move aside. I'll show how this game is really played, he cockily said. Naruto merely huffed before he stood from his chair and let his perverted teacher take his seat, while he reset all of the pieces. After that, the battle of minds between Shiroi and Jiraiya began. For minutes later, a defeated Jiraiya stared at the game in pure disbelief. No, how is this possible? The author of Aika Aika exclaimed as he gazed upon Shiroi's bishop capturing his king. No, I refuse to believe this, he yelled as he shook his head in denial. I win Arrow Gigi. Deal with it, Shiroi stated. Naruto merely gave Jiraiya a look of understanding. After all, Shiroi had just basically handed their asses to them on a silver platter in the chess game. Jiraiya wailed in despair for a few moments, while Shiroi gave a small sweat drop. Seriously, weren't they taking this too seriously? After wailing in despair for a few moments, Jiraiya suddenly stood straight, with a grin on his face. As you two know, it's been 2 years since our journey. Jiraiya began. Both Shiroi and Naruto silently looked at the perverted sage as he spoke. Naruto, you have learned much during our training trip, and I must say I could be more proud of you than I am now. The blonde puffed his chest out in pride as he gave his teacher a look of appreciation for his training and guidance. The white-haired hermit turned to Shiroi. Despite the fact that you never really expressed an interest in learning shinobi arts, and instead focus on mastering what you already knew, I can't help but feel a sense of pride as I look upon you, he stated. Shiroi gave him a beaming smile, before she contentedly placed herself at Naruto's side. Instantly, Naruto wrapped his arm around her waist. Jiraiya smiled at action before he spoke. I'm proud of you both, and I'm happy for the both of you. And now, we only have 1 more year of this trip together, he stated. Both lovers contentedly smiled at Jiraiya. Even QB cracked a slight smile on his face. However, it was quickly wiped away. He was the king of the bijou, and kings didn't smile. They smirked. With that in mind, QB gave a smirk, though it resembled a smile more than anything. It was a scary, huge, demonic smile, but a smile nonetheless. Even Altair pulsed in both contentment and happiness. However, all of their smiles instantly disappeared with Jiraya's next words. Now, if only you two could give me more inspiration by getting active tonight, he leered. Both Shiroi and Naruto looked at each other before they glanced at Jiraya, and they silently came to an agreement. They cracked their knuckles and slowly and menacingly stalked towards the perverted hermit. Jiraya nervously chuckled. "Tita much?" he asked. His only answer was two fists coming towards him at breakneck speeds. QB merely shook his head at their antics. "Humans are so fucking strange," he concluded. Altair pulsed in agreement, while our favorite blonde and his lover were beating the perverted hermit, and shortly after speaking about how to finish the rest of their final year on their journey. Let us take a visit towards Sunagakure. The streets were bustling with life as dozens of villagers, mingling about, selling their items, haggling with others, working deals, and of course gossiping about latest news and somewhat. However, one individual stood out from the rest. Her short, bright pink hair was a dead giveaway as to who the girl was. Her bright green eyes looked at the village with a contentment expression. To those who do not know who this girl was, she was Haruno Sakura, Naruto ex-teammate and former crush. The recently promoted Chunin had just got her shift at the hospital done, and now she chose to just wander around until she found something to do. She appearance had hardly changed, with slight changes you would notice. But you wouldn't really notice unless you actually looked closely. I'm pretty sure everyone knows how she looks in Shippuden. After several minutes of wondering, she sighed as nothing caught her interest. However, her ears perked when she heard the voice of her childhood friend Yamanaka Ino. "Hey, Sakura," Ino greeted as she stood in front of her childhood friend with her hands on her hips. "Hey, Ino, how's it been?" The pink-haired girl greeted with a smile. A bit boring, but other than that, not much else." Ino shrugged. Sakura gave a slight grin. "Yeah, it's been pretty boring around here, hasn't it? It kind of makes me wish back for the old days back when—" Sakura stopped herself saying more, seeing as she was still a bit sore about the subject of her team. Ino, seeing Sakura become disheartened, quickly changed the subject. "I heard Hinata is still acting. Strange." Strange was an understatement. After several weeks following Naruto's departure for his training journey, she had become snappish for some strange reason. And every time she saw something in a silvery white color, she would snap and just destroy in a fit of rage. Everyone became wary of the Hyuga after that. However, a year earlier, she again went into a fit of rage and destroyed dozens of white-colored objects. Ever since then, she had become snappish when something white was related. And a lot of things were white these days. Nobody knew just why she would go into a fit of rage, but they wisely chose not to mention anything white near her. "I wonder what's wrong with her," Sakura stated with a slight frown. Everyone was worried about the Hyuga, but they couldn't do anything since she was always fine unless she saw something white, or as so far even resembled white hair. Then she would go into a frenzy. "I know. I asked my father to speak with Hayashi-sama about Hinata, but Hayashi-sama merely said that he didn't know what was making his daughter so angry," Ino said with a frown on her features. They quickly changed the subject into something else. They spoke about the latest gossip in the village, the missions they've been on, their training, and of course the latest fashion. Then Ino randomly brought up the subject of a certain blonde whiskered-faced blonde. "So, how do you think Naruto's doing?" Ino asked. "Naruto? He's probably training with Jiraiya-sama to get stronger, that's for sure," the pink-haired girl said with a chuckle. "Yeah, you're right. You know, it's strange. I actually miss my fellow blonde," the platinum blonde-haired girl said. "Yeah, in a way I miss him too," Sakura agreed. "So, do you think he got handsome?" Ino stated with a grin, crossing her features. Sakura raised an eyebrow at Ino, This is Naruto. Even if he did become a bit handsome, I bet he would still be the same old knuckle-headed Naruto from the academy days. Sakura deadpanned. Poor Sakura, you have no idea how wrong you are. Oh, come on, Sakura. People change, especially after 2 years. Come to think of it, does he have 1 more year of training left? Ino asked. I just don't see it, Ino. And to answer your question, yes, he does have 1 year left of training. Sakura stated. I do know one thing. Ino began, if Naruto is as handsome as I believe him to be, then I am so going for him. She finished. Not a second after she spoke that sentence, she felt an oppressive aura engulf her. She felt cold and helpless, almost as if her very soul was being slowly and painfully being forced out of her body in an agonizing manner. She wanted to curl up into a ball and cry, but she couldn't even move. The entire world around her was shut out. The only thing she could hear was her breathing. Visions of her death came to pass, and each one more gruesome and bloody than the last. Regaining some of her motor functions, she could only slightly lift her head, and she caught a vision of pink-slitted eyes, glowing a menacing pink color. The eyes glared at her with a feral rage so hot that she could feel her skin being melted off. She suddenly heard a voice, and the tone of the voice told her she had done something incredibly stupid. She didn't even know what she did. He is mine, the voice hissed out. Ino swallowed a lump in her throat. The voice was female, and it spoke in a tone so cold that her entire body, even her bones, were chilled to the core. Ino stuttered in a small and fearful voice. He is mine, the female voice yelled. Who is why yours? The platinum blonde fearfully questioned. Flashes went through her mind. Flashes of a girl with silvery white hair and pink-slitted eyes. Flashes of how the girl first met Naruto, their time together, their first date, the day they became a couple, a glimpse of the night of when they became true lovers, and the time they spent together after that night. He is mine, the voice dangerously hissed. Ino gulped. Why you talking about in Naruto? She stuttered. Ino only had one thought going through her head at the moment. Just what the fuck is happening? She thought. She heard the voice almost purr in approval of her answer. That's when she realized that whoever this voice belonged to, it belonged to the girl in the visions. She can't lie. She noticed how happy her fellow blonde was when he was with the silvery white-haired girl. And she saw how the girl was equally happy with the blonde. And somehow, the girl was able to project an astral mind projection of her mind and placed into her mind. Somehow, the girl either heard or felt Ino's words, meaning this was all very real. But it was also a matter of minds. Ino felt a bit of her confidence return. After all, she was a Yamanaka, and Yamanaka specialized in mind techniques, so this should be a piece of cake, right? You speak as if Naruto was a possession, Ino stated, even if it was a bit hypocritical. Eerie silence was Ino's answer. It was the calm before the storm. Despite the feeling of impending doom, Ino continued, I don't know who you are exactly. Ino began, but you speak as if Naruto were an item. Do you even really love him? Ino finished. She knew she was stepping out of line. After all, she saw the vision, she saw how happy the girl and the blonde were. But poor Hinda had a crush on the blonde since the academy. She only said she would go for the blonde a test run of sorts. If Ino would truly fall in love with her fellow blonde, then all bets were off. And if the relationship didn't work out at all, then she would break up with him as gently as possible. Unfortunately for Ino, astral projection of Shiroi did not like Ino questioning her love for Naruto at all. Ino uncertainly looked around, not sensing anything. After several moments, she thought astral projection just left, but her breath hitched in her throat as she felt a malicious aura behind. If possible, Ino felt more cold and helpless than she did the first time. She fearfully and slowly turned her head behind her, and the astral projection of Shiroi was glaring at her with a feral rage in her eyes. Her mouth was set into a vicious and furious snarl, revealing her lengthening fangs. How dare! That platinum blonde questioned her love for Naruto. She felt her rage increase as the words echoed in her mind. She loved Naruto more than anything, and yet this slut dare say she didn't love him. Oh, Shiroi will enjoy breaking her. I am going to break you. The astral Shiroi hissed. Ino's leg twitched, and that was all Shiroi needed as she suddenly lunged at her with the intent to tear her head off her shoulders. Ino saw her fangs gleam, and she screamed. Ino! Ino! Sakura shouted before she slapped her childhood friend across the face. Sakura? Ino stuttered before she frantically looked around the area. All she saw was the faces of other villagers gazing at the two kunoichi worriedly. Ino looked back at Sakura to see concern in her eyes. Ino, what happened? You just suddenly froze up for a moment, then suddenly collapsed and screamed, the pink-haired girl said. Ino gave one final sweep of the area, making sure that the girl wasn't there, before she gave Sakura a nervous smile. I'm fine, Sakura. Just had a strange daydream is all, she said, hoping Sakura would take the hint. Sakura gave Ino a skeptical look. After all, you just don't randomly in the middle of the street. But she relented, however, when she caught sight of the pleading look she was giving her. All right, Ino, I guess if you're fine. She couldn't continue speaking, however, as Ino suddenly shot and gave her a grateful smile. Thanks, Sakura. I'll see you later, she said, before she quickly left. She wanted to speak with her father about what happened, and if it were really possible to have mental abilities, like she just witnessed. Sakura watched Ino walk away with a look of worry and concern. She sighed once Ino wasn't in her sight anymore. She looked up towards the sky, only to see it darkening somewhat. Night was slowly coming, and the sun was just setting over the horizon. With nothing else to do, the pink-haired female decided to head home, though she couldn't help the feeling that Ino was hiding something important. She only hoped it wouldn't cause any problems. Poor Sakura. Again, you don't realize just mistaken you are. It will be a problem, just for certain people. Tsunade watched the sun set over the horizon with a blank face. She had by some miracle managed to finish her paperwork, and now she was waiting for Jiraya's first report in 2 years. It was an agreement they made. Jiraya would send her a report of Naruto's skills in 2 years, thus she would be fully aware of how powerful her surrogate son was. And then the perverted sage would teach Naruto strategy for the last year. And now the female Hokage would finally get the report of how powerful Naruto was. She couldn't stop the feeling of anticipation welling up inside her. She would finally know how strong her surrogate son was after 2 long years. How long has it been since she last saw the blonde's bright and warming smile? How long had it been since she last felt this motherly instinct threaten to override her? Shizen was like one of her children as well, but the female brunette was at least 25. As such, she couldn't let out her mother instinct with Shizen, as she was a grown woman. However, Naruto was another story altogether. He wasn't even 18 yet. As such, he was still somewhat of a child, meaning it was okay for her to act motherly with the younger blonde. A smile crossed her features. That brat. Even when he wasn't here, he could still cause these mother feelings to well up inside her. A small poof of smoke caught her attention. She turned her head, only to meet with the messenger toad known as Kosuke. Hey, are you Senju Tsunade? Kosuke asked. Tsunade merely nodded her head. Message from Jiraya, the red toad stated as he handed a scroll towards the busted blonde. Tsunade accepted the scroll with a nod of thanks. The toad blinked. That was the first time someone had thanked him when he delivered a message. It felt nice being appreciated, damn it. Messengers deserve some respect as well. Kosuke gave Tsunade short "you're welcome" before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Tsunade eagerly opened the scroll to read its contents. Halfway through, her eager expression turned into disappointment. The letter stated that he would explain all about Naruto's abilities in person a year from now, as he believed it would be best. Seeing as both of them knew that some messages from her desk had been mysteriously disappearing and being replicated, and then ending up back in the desk, Tsunade knew they were replicated, seeing as the handwriting was never the same. Tsunade suspected Danzo's route to be responsible, but she couldn't get any evidence. Danzo was a slippery motherfucker, that was for sure. However, the end of the note caught her attention. Naruto got a future wife. She blinked once, twice, and a third time, before a massive grin erupted from her face. Naruto, her surrogate son, had finally given up on Sakura. She had always thought that Sakura was all wrong for the blonde, seeing as she almost constantly berated him on almost every occasion. She kept her opinion to herself, however, as she knew the blonde was more stubborn than anyone. Trying to convince Naruto to do something he didn't like was like trying to get a fucking brick to talk. It was impossible. Believe me, I tried, lol. But this Jiraya apparently got Naruto to forget the pink-haired girl, and he had fallen so deeply in love with her that he completed most of his training and missions so quickly, so that he may spend time with her. And the girl returned his feelings quite eagerly as well. She hadn't seen two people this in love since. Minato and Kushina. A nostalgic smile came upon her face. Hearing about the two made her remember Kushina, Minato, and Dan, the man she had fallen in love with. One thing was for sure. Tsunade couldn't wait to meet Shiroi. While Naruto, Shiroi, and Jiraiya were finishing the remainder of their training journey, let us take a visit to an old rival and an former brother figure to the blonde. Blood-red eyes with three slowly rotating tomo were all one could see in the darkness of the room. The door to the open to the right opened, and Yakushi Kabuto stood in the doorway, giving his trademark taunting and smug smirk. The crimson Sharingan eyes glanced at the silver-haired man before they were trained back onto the wall he had been staring at for the past several hours. "Good morning, Sasuke-kun. Orochimaru-sama is requesting you. Your pet has killed another one of our subordinates," Kabuto smoothly said, taunting and smug smirk still crossing his features. Sasuke merely gave a low grunt before he responded after several moments of silence. "I told you all before." Sasuke began. "I don't care what Tia does," he finished. "And she isn't my pet," he snapped shortly after. He gave Kabuto a cold glare before going back to staring at the wall. "That's the bad, Sasuke-kun, because Orochimaru-sama has been thinking about cutting off all ties with her," Kabuto said, trying to get a reaction out of the Uchiha. "Like I said before, what he does to her is of no concern to me," the brunette coldly stated. It had been 3 years since Sasuke's defection from Konoha, 2 years of training almost non-stop, and he was pleased with the results. For the first year, he worked on increasing his skills on ninjutsu and taijutsu. He was proud to say that his skills on ninjutsu were low-level Kage, while his taijutsu was on high-level Umbu. For the second year, they worked on his genjutsu. He was extremely pleased to say his genjutsu skills were high-level Kage, on par with Uchiha Itachi, his older brother and the one he wants to kill most. Just thinking about Itachi caused a surge of hatred to run through his very being. He had done what Itachi said. He allowed his hatred for him to fester and grow. His hatred for Itachi knew no bounds. He wouldn't stop until Itachi was dead, and he will kill anyone who stands in his way. Especially if a certain whiskered-faced blonde tries to stop him, then he would destroy him utterly. And finally, his last year, they worked on his newfound interest in Kenjutsu, and he was proud to say that his Kenjutsu skills were at least high-level A-rank borderline S-rank. With his newfound power, he believed he was ready to finally kill Itachi. "Oh, so you don't care what Orochimaru-sama does to her," Kabuto said, a small frown on his face. Orochimaru wanted Sasuke to breed with the girl after all. If they breed, then that meant more Sharingans in Orochimaru's possession. "That's right. So, do what you want with her," Sasuke stated as his Sharingan eyes morphed back into his normal onyx black color. Kabuto shrugged and opened his mouth to speak, only to stop and jump back as the door was slammed open, nearly hitting him in the process. "Uchiha, get off your fat lazy ass and get me some damn food," a female voice angrily demanded. Sasuke merely glared coldly at the girl, who was unfazed by his glare. The girl had long, dark pink hair flowing down her back. Her bangs swayed messily and narrowly into her eyes, but they didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. Two long bangs framed her face and stopped at her stomach. Her dark blue eyes were set into an angry and cold glare as she stared at the Uchiha. Her eyelashes were slightly curved, and her nose was small but a bit sharp as well. She wore a black skin-tight shirt that hugged her generous bust and an unzipped leather jacket over it. And the final thing to her attire was the dark blue shorts she wore, with a blood-red belt around her waist that held several pouches. All in all, she was a beautiful girl. But what would really catch someone's attention were her pointed ears and the black feathered wings on her forearms, along with the bird-like feet with razor-sharp talons she had, and her light blue skin. This girl was named Tia, and she was a harpy. "Don't look at me like that, you bitch-ass Uchiha. Now get off your arse and give me some fucking food now," she sneered. Did he forget to mention that she had a bad mouth and a very dangerous temper? They met during the time when he and the Orochimaru were moving to another one of his bases. He saw her snatch and eat a wolf from the ground. When she saw him, she immediately tried killing him. She almost did too, but he managed to survive, albeit barely. However, they stopped fighting when they saw the hatred in each other's eyes. Curiosity getting the best of, he asked who she hated. She glared at him for several minutes before she replied that she hated an old friend of hers that killed her brother. She glared at him for several more minutes before she asked who he hated. He replied that he hated his older brother for murdering his entire clan. They gained an understanding that day. They weren't friends. Oh, they were far from it, in fact. However, they understood each other's hatred, and as such they were able to tolerate each other, so they tolerated the other's presence. However, should they have to, they would abandon each other without any remorse. Orochimaru was fascinated with the dark pink-haired harpy and tried to experiment on her multiple times. That is until Tia threatened to rip his crotch off with her talons. Orochimaru, if possible, paled slightly before he backed off and never tried to experiment on her again. Another thing was that every once in a while a new subordinate would make a comment about her being Sasuke's toy. Tia immediately killed them in a gory and bloody mess until nothing was left but a smear on the wall. She made it very clear that she hated Sasuke, a sentiment shared by the Uchiha. "I am not going to give my breakfast," Sasuke said, making sure to keep a steaming hot breakfast in his sight. Of course, that didn't stop Tia from treating Sasuke like her slave. "Bitch, you're not even eating," Tia said, a scowl working on her face. Sasuke, I twitched. Damn, she was annoying. "I'm waiting for it to cool off," he coolly replied. Tia rose an eyebrow as she stared blankly at the Uchiha. "You're a little pussy-ass bitch, aren't you? You can't even handle a hot breakfast. Damn, you're such a pussy. How you survived this long in the world, I'll never know," she stated. She also took every chance she got to belittle the Uchiha. Sasuke twitched. Was this how Naruto felt when Sakura belittled him? If so, then his respect for the blonde went up a little. "Well, I hope you're done killing our subordinates, Tia," Kabuto questioned, smirked back on his face. Tia looked at Kabuto in wonder, as if astonished to see him alive. "Oh, the prissy bitch is actually all right. I was worried that your precious Orochimaru-sama had stretched your ass out too much last night," she said in a shocked tone. Sasuke took a sadistic glee when he saw Kabuto twitch. Tia had that effect on everyone. She would annoy any and everyone she met, especially Orochimaru. Heck, Sasuke thinks that she purposely irritates everyone just to get a rise out of them. "What are you smirking about, bitch? Give that fucking breakfast you have there now," the harpy demanded as she whirled around at Sasuke. Sasuke twitched before he sighed in annoyance. Silently, he handed his breakfast to the harpy. For some reason, he lost his appetite. Tia looked at the food with glee, before she stopped and scowled towards the Uchiha and Kabuto. "What?" Sasuke asked, noticing the scowl, while Kabuto merely raised an eyebrow. "I'm not eating in the same room as you two, so get the fuck out," she slowly demanded, lacing her words with killing intent. Kabuto shrugged before he silently left the room and waited by the door. He knew what was to come. I'm not leaving. This is my room after all, Sasuke coldly stated. A look of rage, fury, and hatred came upon Tia's face before she growled menacingly at the dark-haired boy. Bitch, I don't care if you're the fucking king of the world. When I tell you to do something, you do it. Do you understand me, bitch? She roared, before she figure blurred, and Sasuke was suddenly thrown out the room at high speeds, and he landed face first into a wall. Next time, don't fucking question me, bitch. Tia sneered, before she roughly slammed the door. Sasuke slowly stood, his entire form shaking in unrestrained fury as his Sharingan eyes glared hatefully at the door to his room. She is such a loose cannon, Kabuto muttered. Sasuke grunted, before he silently stood and slightly limped down the halls. Soon his goal, no, his ambition, would become a reality. Soon he would kill Orochimaru at his weakest and then hunt down Itachi. Soon he would avenge his clansmen. Soon all that hard work and training would finally pay off. He just had to find the perfect chance to strike. And he knew when the perfect chance would present, all he had to do was be patient. After all, patience was very rewarding. There was nothing but darkness in the cave. No amount of light could be seen, only darkness. A massive humanoid statue was in the middle of the cave with its arms held out and its palms opened. A single figure phased into existence on one of the fingers, shortly joined by another shorter figure. The shorter one opened her orange eyes. Conan, did you contact them? The taller asked in a deep and dead tone, as he slowly opened his silverish-purple eyes with multiple rings circling the pupil. The shorter figure gave a short nod beside him, and she spoke a much softer voice confirming she was female, although her voice had an emotionless tone much like her male counterpart. Yes, Pain-sama. They will arrive shortly, she spoke. Pain merely nodded his head slightly before they began to wait for the rest of their group's arrival. They didn't have to wait long, as slowly several more figures began phasing into existence much like he did. The only thing visible about them were their eyes. Well, it's been a while since we gathered like this. It's that time already, huh? A tallest of the males asked. His beady eyes looked at all of them with mirth, as he gave them all a shark-like grin. His partner, the shorter male beside, merely opened his crimson-red eyes, while 3 spinning tomos slowly rotated across the pupils. Kisame, the crimson-eyed individual, began in an emotionless drawl. We did not come here to banter. No doubt Leader-sama has called to assign us our targets. He finished. Kisame gave a mirth chuckle. Sorry, Itachi-san. It's just that I'm strangely excited. He grinned. I just want our target assigned already so I can get back to working on my art. Another spoke, his blue eyes sparkling at the thought of his art. Deidara, shut up. The longer we make this meeting, the longer my spies are forced to wait. And I do not like to keep people waiting, his hunchback partner gruffly stated, as his eyes glared coldly at his partner. And your so-called art is nothing compared to mine, he said shortly after. Sorry about that, Sasori Dana, Deidara said, before Sasori's last sentence registered in his head. What did you say about my art? True art is a bang, not some useless puppet like the ones you create, he balefully stated. And I told you, Deidara, true art is eternal, Sasori stated in a matter-of-fact tone. Deidara bristled at the comment. Ha ha ha, you fuckers are entertaining, you know that. Another member said, his red eyes filled with amusement and an arrogant look in his eyes. Hayden, shut up. Your voice irritates me. His partner coldly stated. His green eyes with red scare looked at his partner with an apathetic glare, though if you looked closely you would be able to see the amount of disdain he held for his partner. Hey, fuck you, could it? Hayden angrily exclaimed, as he pointed a finger at his partner. If you want to keep that finger, then I suggest you lower it, Hayden, Kazuka coldly said, his eyes narrowing icily and dangerously. Hayden merely scoffed. And what are you going to do about it? He said with an almost manic grin on his face. I'll kill you without any remorse. The bounty hunter stated. Enough, Pain calmly stated, though there was a certain edge in his tone that everyone immediately noticed. Instantly, all arguing and conversation stopped. You are here to receive your assignments, not bicker among yourselves, Pain said, his voice carrying across the entire area. Everyone stood at attention. Everyone knew that when Pain was speaking like the way he was now, you had to listen. It was a rule if you broke it. Well, the last person who broke that rule was killed in an extremely painful manner, having your soul slowly ripped from your body while stabbing you with all sorts of weapons, and then bringing you back to life to repeat the process made Pain quickly feared among the Akatsuki. Haiden Kakuzu, do we have enough funds to assist us in our objectives? Pain asked, glancing at the bounty hunter and Jashinist. Kakuzu straightened, we have more than enough, Leader-sama, he indifferently said. Excellent, Pain replied before he turned his attention towards the Akatsuki member who hadn't spoken since the meeting. Zetsu, tell us the information you have on the Jinchurikis. Pain ordered. Zetsu, the Akatsuki spy straightened now that all attention was on him now. The Ichibi Jinchuriki is now the Kazakage of Sunagakure, and rarely ever leaves a village. The Nibi Jinchuriki has been completing missions all around the land of lightning lately. Zetsu began, then his other half took over from there. The Sanbai is still reforming, but it won't be long now before it reforms completely. The Yanbi Jinchuriki is currently wandering the land of Earth, while the Gobi Jinchuriki is living in a katega near the border between the land of Earth and Fire. It will be easy to capture them both, seeing as the Tsuchikage doesn't care about them, Black Zetsu stated, before his white half took over. The Rokubi Jinchuriki is currently residing as a small castle near the border of the land of water and rain. The Nanabai is residing in Takigakure for the moment, White Zetsu informed, as his black half took over the rest. The Hachibi Jinchuriki is still locked away in Kumo, so trying to capture would prove to be difficult. And the Kyubi Jinchuriki is still with Jiraya of the Sannin, Black Zetsu finished. Pain nodded at the spy, before he turned his attention on his subordinates. Your targets are as follow. Sasori and Deidara will head towards Suna and capture the Ichibi Jinchuriki. Kakuzu and Haiden will work on capturing the Nibi Jinchuriki. Zetsu will spy on the other nations and inform us if they plan to retaliate and take their Jinchuriki back. Pain said before he turned his attention to Kisame and Itachi. Itachi and Kisame, you will remain on standby. However, should you get the opportunity, I want you to capture the Kyubi Jinchuriki. But that is only a secondary objective, understood? Itachi and Kisame nodded at Pain's plan and course of action. Any questions? No one spoke, as they all understood their mission objectives, and they knew full well that they had to bring the Jinchuriki alive. However, that didn't mean they weren't allowed to use lethal methods if they used their Bija's chakra. Dismissed. Pain ordered. Everyone immediately phased away from existence, eager to get their assignments done. Pain and Conan remained in the darkness of the cave for what seemed like an eternity, before Pain closed his eyes and spoke. I know you are there, he calmly and emotionlessly drawled. It was silent for a few moments, before slowly a single fully mature Sharingan eye opened in the darkness. So now the hunt for the Jinchuriki begins, the figure stated. His voice was deep, rough, cold, and nonchalant as he spoke. I wonder how much the Kyubi Jinchuriki has grown. The man idly mused. You've taken an unusual interest in the Kyubi Jinchuriki, Pain muttered, before he opened his eyes and stared indifferently at the swirling mass face of Tobi. Tobi shrugged, can you blame me? After all, not only is he the Jinchuriki of the most powerful Bijou, he is also the son of the Yondaime Hokage. Tobi explained, if anything, I expect the boy to already be a S-class shinobi. He finished. It doesn't matter. In the end, he will know Pain just like the rest of the world, and an era of true peace can be born. Pain declared confidence in his voice with a hint of arrogance. Fool, This world is nothing but a cruel and cold reality. There is no true peace. There is only Project Suki no Mi. Toby thought, do what you will pain. But remember I am watching. Toby warned before he slowly vanished in a swirling vortex from his eye. After several moments of silence, Pain turned his head towards Conan. Is something wrong, Conan? The ringed-eyed man questioned. Conan gave the area a quick scan, confirming that Toby was gone before she spoke. I don't trust that man Nagato, she answered, using his true name as they were now alone. Pain merely nodded his head at Conan's words. Nor do I, Conan. However, his help is greatly required if we are to capture the bijou and work our way towards true peace by showing this world true pain. The Akatsuki leader declared, and I will stand with you every step of the way, Nagato. Conan declared. Pain said nothing. He merely phased himself out of existence. Conan followed shortly after. They never noticed a black version of Zetsu melt into the wall. Shiroi contentedly watched as two children played eagerly in the backyard of their home. The amount of happiness on their faces were impossible to fathom, and the smile on her face was one of love and contentment. The first child, the boy, had faded whisker marks on his cheeks, shoulder-length spiky golden blonde hair with streaks of silver in them, bright blue eyes with twinge of pink in them, and a slitted pupil. Also, if you were to look closely at the boy's grin, then you would be able to see tiny fangs in his teeth. He wore black shirt, with the Uzumaki spiral on the back, blue shorts, and on his feet he wore red sandals. The second child, a girl, also had faded whisker marks on her cheeks, long silvery white hair, with golden blonde streaks flowing through them, bright pink eyes with a twinge of blue in them, and a slitted pupil as well. Like her male counterpart, she too had fangs in her teeth if you were to look closely. She wore a yellow sundress with a red Uzumaki spiral on the front of the dress. On her feet, she wore green sandals on her feet. The two children played happily together, and that made her smile. Feeling a presence behind, she turned her head, only to meet with the face of her husband and lover. He really hadn't changed that much. His golden blonde hair was still as unkempt and spiky as the day he was born. His bright blue eyes regarded the children warmly and love, and his whiskered face was still as adorable and cute as she remembered. He didn't wear his robes today, something she was glad for, though he still had Altair in its sheath by his side. Naruto smiled at Shiroi lovingly before he planted a kiss to her cheek that made her flush a bit. The two children noticed and began to run towards him with their arms spread out for a hug. The children said two words that made her entire being warm up with warmth and joy. Tu-chan, Ka-chan. Shiroi slowly opened her eyes from the pleasant and wonderful dream she was having, though a blush worked away on her face, just thinking about the two children she saw in the dream. They were so wonderful and beautiful to look upon. Even if they didn't exist yet, they already found a special place in her heart, much like Naruto. Speaking of the blonde, she turned her gaze from the window and unto his peacefully sleeping self, his hair unkempt, and if possible even messier than it was before. His lips were set into a peaceful and content smile. She blushed lightly, remembering that they were currently sleeping in the nude because of their activities last night. By Kami, the amount of stamina the blonde had was incredible. Even though they had sex nearly every night, whenever they wanted to make love, or when they felt lust for each other, it still boggled her how much stamina he had. She blushed, as she nearly gave a tired yawn. Again, they spent nearly the entire night being active. But it was morning now, and as such it was not proper for a lady to sleep in. Now she just had to find a way to wake up her mate. She grinned mischievously, as she thought up of a way to wake. Slowly, she gave a soft peck to his chest and worked her way up from there, trailing kisses along the way. She gave several pecks to his chin and lips before she moved her way to his neck. She grinned when she heard pleasurable groans coming from him. She stopped and gave a victorious smirk as she stared at the mark on his neck. It was a symbol that he belonged to her, and her alone. The mark on her own neck meant the same. She was his and his alone, and that was the way she wanted it. She gave a slight lick to his neck, right along the mark, and she grinned in glee when he unconsciously gave a small groan. Without any further debate, her fangs began to extend, and she bit down on his neck, though she kept her eyes half open so she could see his awakening. 3 seconds later, Naruto's eyes opened. He gave a smile as he turned and gave her an amusement and mirthful stare, with a great deal of love in them. "Must you wake me like this all the time? Shiroi-chan," he whispered. Shiroi gave him a small wink, before she separated from his neck, having her fill of blood for now. "I like waking you like this, Naruto-kun," she answered. Naruto gave her an amused look, before he spoke again. "Do you have to straddle me as well?" he asked with an amused smirk, though there was a flush to his cheeks. "After all, your maid is straddling you with her naked body, while you are also in the nude. You try not getting a boner. It's impossible." Shiroi gave a small giggle. "Oh, is Naruto-kun getting a bit of morning wood?" she teased. "Well, maybe we should rectify that," she seductively whispered. She pressed her lips to his. They kissed slowly for several moments, before the kiss began to get more heated and passionate. Just as they were going to go further, a knocking sounded on their door. They both abruptly stopped and stared at the door, Naruto with a confused face, and Shiroi with a blank face, though inside her mind it was a different matter entirely, as she was coming up with multiple ways to maim and brutally kill the person behind the door in the most painful and violent death possible. "Gaki, get your ass out here, would ya?" the perverted sage known as Jiraya exclaimed, his voice slightly muffled through the door. Naruto sighed, before he wrapped a few bed sheets around his waist and made his way towards the door. "Yes, Ero-sensei?" Naruto asked, once he opened the door, only allowing Jiraiya to see him and not Shiroi. "Yeah, Gaki, get your stuff together and get ready, we're going to leave soon and—" He trailed off, however, when he noticed Naruto's state, or rather, the kiss marks on his lips, combined with the slightly annoyed look the blonde was giving him. Jiraiya immediately put 2 and 2 together. "Were you and Shiroi getting ready to get active?" he leered, with a perverted expression on his face. Naruto immediately shut the door, very nearly hitting the perverted hermit in the face. Naruto waited for the shout of pain Jiraiya was bound to give, but slightly scowled when instead perverted giggling reached his ears, and it decreased in volume, though he could still hear it. He sighed before he gave Shiroi an apologetic look. "Sorry, Shiroi-chan, but it's time to leave now, so we got to get dressed," he said. Shiroi pouted for a little, before she sighed fine. "Let's just get dressed already," she grumbled. As they were getting dressed, Naruto thought about the last year of training he had. The last year of his training was somewhat interesting for the blonde. After 3 months of learning strategy, Jiraiya found him to be at an acceptable level, just a bit under Kakashi, though the blonde didn't like planning before a battle. After all, if you plan before a battle, then obviously you're going to stick to it. But what if something unexpected happened, and your plan wouldn't allow adaptation? That was why he liked to plan during a battle and come up with strategies on the fly. It was how he fought, and he wasn't changing his style. After that, to his and everyone's surprise, they found out he had a third element. To his great surprise, he had a small lightning affinity. That surprised the blonde, but he brushed off and learned how to channel his new chakra nature. After 6 months, the blonde believed he was at an acceptable level with his new nature, with Jiraiya agreeing with him. His relationship with the QB took an interesting turn as well. The QB stated that he would allow the blonde to wield 2 tails of his chakra because he proved himself to be a competent warrior. The QB could be a sarcastic ass at times, but the blonde considered him a friend. Not to mention the QB had been with him since birth, so in a way, the QB had always been there for the blonde, despite him not knowing, though QB appeared to have blushed. Not that he couldn't tell, and claimed that it was natural for the king of all Bijou to look after his subjects, even if one was human. Plus the blonde represented him, so if he died, then he would be considered a failure of a Bijou for not only having a weak container, but for also allowing his container to have a disgraceful death. Naruto snorted at that. To him, the Kyuubi was a bit of a tsundere. And he was right. There were times when he would be cold to the blonde, at times when he would act like a worried mother hen looking after her child. Of course, the giant fox denied any of that. Finishing putting on his clothes and his robes, he looked himself in the mirror, making sure everything was in place. Throwing knives, check. Hidden blades, check. Robe darts, check. Crossbow, check. Pouches, check. Kunai, check. And finally, Altair. Where the fuck was Altair? The blonde looked around, frantically looking around for his faithful sword. A pulse reached the blonde, and he looked over to the door's entrance to see Altair leaning against the wall. Naruto in relief. The blonde moved towards a blade and delicately picked it up. Thought I lost you for a moment there, Altair, Naruto said in a relieved tone. Altair pulsed in contentment at being in his wielder's hand once again. The blonde quickly placed Altair in its sheath before he let it hang by his waist. The blonde checked himself over one more time. Seeing everyone in order, he moved towards the door and waited for Shiroi to finish getting dressed. He didn't have to wait long, as his fully dressed mate came from the bathroom door and moved in front of him. Are you ready, Shiroi-chan? The blonde questioned. Shiroi gave him a short nod. Smiling, Naruto placed his hood on before he opened the door, and the both of them exited the room and made their way down the halls and down the stairs. Reaching the downstairs, they quickly spotted the elder Toad Sage waiting patiently for them by the exit door of the hotel with a smirk on his face. Smiling, or rather smirking, the three of them exited the hotel. Time to return to Konoha. Izumo, one of the two eternal gate guards, sighed as his best friend Kotetsu was once again snoozing. Seriously, the bastard was lazy as fuck. Izumo sighed once again. He missed the Uzumaki kid. He knew full who the kid's parents were. After all, he met the yondaime and his wife on several occasions. He knew enough about them to know that the resemblance to the yondaime was no coincidence, not to mention the kid had his mother's attitude as well. He suspected that Kakashi knew full well who the blonde was as well, seeing as the masked jonin was quite persistent on having the blonde on his team after he passed the academy. Heck, the Ika Ika fan had to argue with Anko, Konoha's own snake mistress for the blonde. Anko's reasons for wanting the blonde was because they lived a similar life, and that only she would be able to truly understand him and give him the attention he needed. Kakashi's reasons were because the blonde was his sensei's son, and that only he could show the blonde what the will of fire truly meant. He thought it was a load of bull, seeing as, from his observations, the blonde knew full well what the will of fire meant. Kotetsu and Anko knew that Kakashi was just being a little selfish, wanting to remain close to his sensei's son in the closest form possible. The closest he could get to the blonde was becoming his jonin sensei without causing suspicion. Anko was a bit heartbroken when the sandaime took Kakashi's side. He should know. He was a friend of Anko, so he knew how depressed and disappointed she was when she couldn't train the blonde and take him as her apprentice. He remembered how when most of the jonins got together and spoke about their students, she would stare at Kakashi in envy when he spoke about Naruto, and how angry she was when he only taught his team the tree-walking exercise during an A-rank mission. She exploded and yelled to Kakashi on why he would take Genin on a C-rank mission to an A-rank mission with no support. Kakashi argued that he let his team decide if they should continue or not. And of course Anko exclaimed that he could have called for backup. Anko angrily said that Kakashi wasn't fit to be a teacher because of his lazy habits and his insufferable tendencies to be late. The friendship between the two had been a little rocky since then. However, when Anko heard that Kakashi was nominating them for the Chunin exams, she again snapped and was furious with the former AMBU. After the meeting was over, she stomped over to Kakashi and let her opinion known about his course of action. She claimed that yet again that he was unfit to be a jonin sensei. Sending fresh genin to the Chunin exams were like you wanted to kill your team, and that he probably didn't even train his team for the exams, let alone taught them anything other than teamwork, which is useless anyway if they didn't cooperate with each other properly. It was no secret that the Uchiha believed he didn't even need a team. Kakashi argued that Naruto was in his team now and his student, and that if she didn't like it, then she could take it with the Hokage. Anko merely gave Kakashi an angry and cold glare, and told him that she was going to be an exam proctor only to keep an eye on her surrogate little brother. Many of the people who heard her blinked at the relationship between the two, and before anyone could ask her why she considered the blonde her little brother, she stormed out of the building with a glare to any and everyone who looked at it. And yet again she was furious when she found out Kakashi was training Sasuke instead of the blonde. So she set out for finding the blonde, and to her surprise, she found him learning under Jiraya. A smile lit her face knowing that he was in, arguably, good hands. After witnessing that, she set out to give Kakashi a piece of her mind once again. No one knew what happened between them, but they all noticed how Kakashi shuddered when someone mentioned a rubber duck and a senbon. It was somewhat amusing for Izumo, watching Kakashi shudder every time someone mentioned a rubber duck and senbons. He lightly shook his head, clearing his mind of all thoughts, and looked towards the horizon. His eyes narrowed, however, when he caught sight of three figures heading right towards the gate at a slow and leisurely pace. He kicked his best friend awake, not only making him fall out of his chair, but for him to also let out a surprised squeak. He silently laughed, before he straightened up when Kotetsu was glaring at him. He silently gestured his hand to the three figures coming to the gates. Kotetsu's eyes widened slowly, before they gained a bored look to them, though his body did tense as they were getting closer. When the three figures were close enough, both of their mouths dropped. Leading the two was Jiraya of the Sannin. Behind him was a girl with silvery white hair and pink slitted eyes, with a beauty so natural and beautiful that they needed several moments to regain their composure. However, the third and final figure surprised them immensely. Those robes! The gauntlets with the image of a large nine-tailed fox on them, the eagle-based sword strapped to his side, the crossbow on his back. It was the A-ranked unknown shinobi by the moniker Fox Assassin. However, they were paying more attention to his face that caught their attention, seeing as the hood was off his head. Spiky golden blonde hair tied in what they suspected to be a low ponytail, spiked bangs framing his face, bright blue eyes that were gazing upon the village with a happy express, and the whisker marks on his cheeks. It couldn't be. No, it was Uzumaki Naruto. Izumo heard his best friend softly utter, as a large smile came upon their faces. They idly noticed how the whited-haired girl had her arm hooked around the blonde's arm like a married couple. But they cast that aside. After all, their favorite blonde was back. Gossip could wait. Yo, Kotetsu, Izumo, still on guard duty, huh? Naruto greeted once he was close enough to the two eternal gate guards, a broad grin crossing his features. Kotetsu and Izumo chuckled along with the blonde and Sannin, though Shiroi merely gave them a judging stare for a few moments, before she giggled along with them. That didn't go unnoticed by Jiraya, but he filed that away for later. Naruto, it's great that you're back, man. Konoha has been a little dead since you left, to be honest, Kotetsu said, after he gained control of his laughter. Izumo gave the blonde a pleasant and teasing grin, and who knew you would bring back a girlfriend there? He teased. Both of the Chunin were expecting the blonde to stammer and stutter in his sentence, but to their shock, he smiled and placed his arm around Shiroi's waist. Kotetsu, Izumo, I want you to meet Shiroi-chan, my mate and future wife, Naruto said in a tone of warmth and love for the girl beside him. Shiroi blushed deeply beside her mate and husband-to-be. Though it was unofficial, they had taken to calling each other that since it was obvious it's what they wanted. Both Kotetsu and Izumo were stunned into silence for a few moments before they suddenly gave Shiroi a judging stare. After several moments, they both leaned back with satisfied expressions on their faces. We approve, they both stated at the same time. Shiroi felt a surge of anger course through her. Who were they to judge their relationship? Who were they to decide if she was any good for Naruto? Who were they to say that Naruto and her needed their approval? Naruto seemed to agree with her, as he spoke in a slightly tense and disapproval in his tone. Since when did I need anyone's approval on who I chose to marry? Both Kotetsu and Izumo glanced at each other before they grinned at the blonde. Since that day, when you were only 6, Naruto, the day you met us, was the day we decided to be your surrogate older brothers. Kotetsu commented with warmth and a hint of fondness in his voice. Naruto stiffened, before a large smile came upon his face as he stared at the 2 gate guards. Thanks for caring, guys. Meanwhile, Shiroi pursed her lips in thought. When Naruto was 6, she searched the memories she obtained from the blonde when she drank his blood. When he was 6, her eyes widened slightly in realization. That was around the time of his 5th beating, where they nearly ripped his arm off, and one of them tried to gouge his eyes. But these 2 Chunin saved him, and they treated him to ramen whenever they could. She looked at the 2 with newfound respect. They definitely deserved to be called his older brothers. It's no problem, Otutu. Now, get your ass back in the village already. Hokage-sama wants to see you, no doubt. Izumo grinned, giving the blonde a thumbs up. Kotetsu gave the blonde a broad and brotherly smile before he gestured him to enter the village. Thanks, Aniki's Naruto said, a smile adorning his face. Jiraya gave the blonde a smile, happy that he now had brother figures to look up to. Shiroi stared at the smile on Naruto's face, and a smile of her own came upon her face just watching this heart-warming moment. Without any further delay, the trio entered the village, preparing themselves both mentally and physically. Hard to believe he's back, huh? Kotetsu commented. Yeah, and he's matured quite well as well. I guess all that time with Jiraiya-sama worked wonders for the blonde. He even has a future wife. Izumo replied. Kotetsu grinned. Yeah, I'm glad he forgot about that Sakura chick, he said. Izumo looked at the direction the blonde and his fellow travelers went through. I wonder just how powerful is Agaki now? He idly questioned. Who knows? He's been with a Sannin for 3 full years. He must be way more powerful than Kakashi now. Kotetsu answered. You have a point there. Izumo commented. The duo would have continued their conversation, but they were interrupted by a familiar voice saying their names. Kotetsu-san, Izumo-san. The duo looked over, and they noticed a certain pink-haired girl with 3 12 years behind her. Ah, Sakura-san and the Konohamaru Corps. Kotetsu observed with a disinterested look. Izumo snickered slightly at the glare Sakura, and the 3 kids were giving Kotetsu. Hey, Yufa will never guess who just came back, Izumo said, with a gleam in his eyes at the curious looks he was receiving. So, Gaki, did Konoha change much since you were last here? Jiraiya idly commented, staring at his apprentice, ignoring the look some of the villagers were giving them. Naruto gave a single glance around before he shut his eyes. Nope, not at all, Ero-sensei. Same people, same attitude, different day. That was an understatement. A few villagers gave the blonde a friendly wave now and then, while others merely gave him a neutral look before returning back to work. While most gave the blonde slight scowls, but didn't do more than that. Some of the women of the crowd gave him looks of a predator and lust, but they cowered in fear when Shiroi gave the females her evil eye. Most of the men gave Shiroi looks of lust. However, a quick burst of killing intent from Naruto made them sweat and look away instantly, and they dared not to look back. Jiraya's sweat dropped at both Naruto's answer and the actions they were doing. Teach those pathetic fleshings that they do not fuck with your mate kit. Kyuubi suddenly roared, a little angry that those insignificant worms dared to look at his container's mate like that. He will not stand for it. Altair pulsed in bloodthirsty agreement. See, even the sword listens to me, the giant fox commented in victory. Guys, you know I won't kill them. Naruto thought. Kyuubi snorted in disappointment. You could always maim them, I mean Gaki. Kyuubi offered, going sunder for a moment. Altair pulsed. No, I will not maim them, Kyuubi, and no, Altair, I will not hack off their limbs. The blonde thought, sending more killing intent to another male, who looked at Shiroi in lust. Kyuubi snorted in disappointment once again. Fine then, your choice. Just wake me up when something interesting happens, Kyubi said. Before he went back to sleep, Altair pulsed in disappointment at not being able to hack off the limbs of those villagers that looked upon his wielders made in lust. Naruto rested his hand upon Altair's pummel. Don't worry, Altair. I'll be sure to use you in tonight's sparring session with my clones, Kay. Naruto thought. Altair pulsed in contentment. Naruto smiled slightly. Right before he was forced to send more killing intent to another villager who looked upon Shiroi in lust. Idly he glanced up for whatever reason and found a good viewpoint. Hey, hold on a minute. I want to check out the entire village from that pole, Naruto said before he ran up the pole and stopped at the top. Show off, Jiraya muttered. Shiroi only slightly shook her head with a smile before she looked up to see her husband-to-be overlooking the entire village from his viewpoint. Heh, they finally added Tsunade Bachan's face on the mountain, huh? The blonde rhetorically thought, as a fox-like grin came upon his features. It was true. They did add Tsunade's face on Hokage Mountain. The blonde smiled. It had been such a long time since he saw Tsunade and his surrogate older sister Shizen. His robes ruffled in the wind, and his hair seemed to slightly flow as well. He closed his eyes. He loved this feeling. The feeling of the wind brushing against his face. The feeling of freedom. Naruto and Ai-chan. A voice yelled excitedly. The blonde glanced down from his perch to see 4 figures looking up at him. He grinned before he spread out his arms and leaped off his perch and dived down like an eagle going for its prey. He adjusted his body so that he may be able to land on his feet when he landed. And he landed with a loud thud right on his feet. Slowly he stood and faced the stunned newcomers. Yo Konohamaru, Udon Moegi. He casually greeted the trio of newly graduated genin. He faced the last figure and gave her a friendly smile. Yo Sakura. He nodded to her. The newly arrived others gave Naruto a once-over on his attire and gave his sword a curious look before they filed that away for later. The air around them drastically decreased in temperature. Was winter coming this early? Seriously, for some reason it was cold as the fucking Arctic. Except, the only thing that was really freezing was your soul. Jiraiya shivered at the blank look Shiroi was giving Sakura. An emotion of sadistic glee passed through her eyes before they resumed being blank. But Jiraiya knew that look she had for a split moment. That was the look she had when she wanted to slowly torture someone and then give them the slowest and painful death possible. He mentally offered a small prayer out of pity for the pink-haired girl. He almost felt bad for her. Almost. Sakura felt a cold sweat form on the back of her neck. She felt cold and hollow, almost as if her very soul was being chilled. And just as quickly as it was there, it was gone. Now that the disturbing feeling was gone, she took the time to actually take in Naruto's appearance. And a slight pink hue entered her face. Who knew that the little shrimp she knew as Naruto would become so much taller and more handsome? He was even more handsome than Sasuke now, and that was somewhat shocking to Sakura. She lightly shook her head. He was still probably the same idiotic blonde she knew, meaning he still had a crush on her. Confident in her assessment, she gave the blonde a smile. So, Naruto, do I look more womanly now since the last time you saw me? Sakura asked, a smile on her face as she stared at the blonde, though a surge of confusion went through her when she noticed that Naruto's face did not leave its calm expression. Feeling a piercing stare boring into her head, she glanced to her right when she noticed movement, and to her surprise, a girl with silvery white hair moved to stand beside the blonde, even though she was taller than white-haired girl. She couldn't help but feel as if she were in the presence of a vicious lion that was judging her. She felt as if her life was in this girl's hands. Looking into her pink-slitted eyes, Sakura couldn't help but feel like she had just done something stupid, and that she was treading on very dangerous grounds. And she didn't even know on what ground she was treading on. Nah, Sakura, you haven't changed at all since I last saw you, Naruto finally replied in a polite manner. Sakura's eye twitched slightly at his answer. Completely forgetting about the ominous feeling in the air, she stared at the blonde in annoyance, though she was also inwardly shocked at the polite manner in which he spoke. "Naruto and Ai-chan, who's the girl next to you?" Konohamaru asked, blushing as he stared at the girl, along with Udon, who was also blushing just looking at her, while Moegi stared in awe at the girl's beauty. Naruto smiled. "Shiroi-chan, would you like to introduce yourself, or should I?" the blonde asked. The Konohamaru Corps and Sakura noticed the way he called her Chan. Shiroi smiled lovingly at the blonde as she spoke. "No, I can do it, Naruto-kun," she answered, before she turned her head to gaze upon the four individuals. "Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Shiroi, though I'm not sure if that's the right thing I should say," she greeted with a gleam in her eyes as she trailed off in her sentence. Everyone save Sakura did not notice the gleam in her eyes. Sakura's eyes narrowed only slightly. What did she mean by that? "What do you mean by that, Shiroi-san?" Moegi asked. Shiroi gave the three genin a kind smile. However, when she aimed her smile toward Sakura, it became cold and taunting. "Very well. I guess I should give a proper introduction, no?" Shiroi snickered as I said, "My name is Shiroi. However, in the future I'm going to be called Uzumaki Shiroi. Seeing as Naruto-kun is my fiancé," she finished her sentence with a light bow, and she treasured the look of shock on Sakura's and the genin's faces. The Konohamaru's core eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. This girl was Naruto's wife-to-be? That means that this was their older sister, in a way. "Shiroi-ne-san," Konohamaru affectionately exclaimed, with the other two excitedly following soon after. Meanwhile, Sakura continued to stare at Shiroi and Naruto in disbelief. It just wasn't possible. Naruto with a fiancé? Already? How? What? Why? Her mind, which had so many book smarts, could not comprehend what she had just heard. A lump formed in her throat as Shiroi turned her head towards her. Naruto was chatting animatedly with the genin to even notice their transaction, while Jiraya was currently leering at a couple of women not too far away, basically meaning it was just her and Shiroi. Shiroi's polite and now kind look was off her face, now replaced with a dark look of sadistic glee as she looked upon Sakura. Sakura could, for the life of her, not stop looking into Shiroi's eyes. Visions of her death were soon flashing through her mind, each one more gruesome and bloody than the last. She couldn't move, she couldn't breathe, she couldn't even think. Fear swept into Sakura's heart by just staring into Shiroi's. No, this monster's eyes. She felt as if her very soul was being torn apart, and by the look of dark amusement in Shiroi's eyes, Sakura knew that if she had the choice and could get away with it, she would rearrange her soul into the order she most likely preferred best, leaving Sakura as an eternally broken beyond belief, or as a slave. Sakura released a breath she hadn't known she was holding when Shiroi removed her gaze. She prayed to whatever god out there that would listen to never leave her in a room alone with Shiroi. She didn't think she could handle it. Just being stared at by her was enough to nearly send her into a seizure. "All right, that's enough, everyone. You can play catch-up later. Right now we have to get to Tsunade before she decides to cave in my skull for being late," Jiraya joked, having finished his leering at the group of females. Oh yeah, he had gotten some awesome research material. The Konohamaru Corps looked a bit disappointed before they brightened up, when Naruto promised to talk with them later. Sakura offered to escort them to the Hokage's office, seeing as she needed to report to the Hokage's office anyway. They agreed and set off, though Sakura made sure to stay at least 4 feet away from Naruto, seeing as Shiroi would glare at her whenever she got too close. It didn't take them long to reach the Hokage Tower. When they did, they quickly entered and ignored the secretary who was telling them they needed an appointment. Seriously, they've had an appointment for 3 years. They didn't have to fucking wait. Tsunade was in a battle that took priority, for she was fighting an enemy so evil and vile that even Uchiha Madara whimpered when it was mentioned. What evil could be so vile and dastardly that even Uchiha Madara whimpered when it was mentioned, you may ask? That evil was the dreaded paperwork Tsunade sighed in accomplishment, as she had gotten at least 500 documents signed. That means she only had 10 more documents to go. She was so happy that she could perform a tap dance. She glanced over at the last bit of paper she had to do, and her eyes widened to epic drastically as it had gotten bigger by at least tenfold. She inwardly cried anime tears as she now had even more work to do, and the snickering ANBU were not helping. She looked over at the portraits of the other past Hokages, and she glared at the grinning portrait of Minato. "Damn you, Minato! How did you get your paperwork done so quickly?" she angrily exclaimed. The grin on the portrait of Minato seemed to get wider slightly, and it gave her a wink. "Now that's just creepy," Tsunade uttered, before she turned casting off as the stress finally getting to her. Though as she turned back around, she would have seen the portrait's grin widen more, and it seemed to cackle at Tsunade's plead, before it went right back into its normal pose. Let's ignore that ever happened, all right. Tsunade was distracted from her own hell of paper when knocking came upon her door. A chibi Tsundi was happily dancing in her mind, thanking Cammy for the break she would have. "Come in," she yelled happily. In response, both the window behind her and the door opened. From the door entered Sakura with a silvery white-haired girl with pink slitted eyes. Though Tsunade raised an eyebrow when she noticed that Sakura seemed to give her cautious glances, while the girl merely had a polite and pleasant smile. And from the window entered Jiraya, and her breath hitched in her throat as she caught sight of golden blonde hair. It couldn't be, could it? However, she caught sight of the whisker marks, and she knew this was Naruto. A smile lit her face, and without any further restraint, she shot up from her seat and moved towards the blonde. "Yo, Oba-chan!" Naruto greeted, a grin forming on his lips. Tsunade, once she was close enough, flickered his forehead, causing him to stumble slightly. Hey, Tsunade was still as strong as hell, so it's understandable that a chakra-enhanced flick would make him stumble and feel a slight pain. "Don't call me old, you little gaki," Tsunade exclaimed as she shook her fist at the blonde. "Oh, is Oba-chan afraid of being called out on her true age?" Naruto teased, a smirk on his features. Tsunade's eye twitched, and she was about to give her fellow blonde another flick to his forehead when a slight giggle caught her attention. Curious, she turned her gaze to the silvery white-haired girl that came in with Sakura, and she noticed how she was staring at the blonde with affection and a warmness that reminded her of how she looked at Dan. She eyes slightly widened before they returned to normal. "So you must be Shiroi, correct?" Tsunade asked, a curious expression on her face as she stared at the girl. Shiroi smiled politely at the older woman before she nodded. Meanwhile, Sakura was inwardly smirking a bit on the inside. If her sensei learned of the engagement between Naruto and Shiroi, then she would immediately pound Naruto before setting him straight, and then telling the white-haired girl to get lost. "Oh, yes, Sakura couldn't wait, Efo. It's nice to meet you, Shiroi. So you're marrying the Gaki, huh? All right so far. I like you already. You have that look in your eyes that kind of reminds me of another woman I knew at some point," Tsunade said, a grin forming on her face. Some of the AMBU's jaw dropped when they heard Naruto was marrying the white-haired girl. Sakura's jaw dropped. What? Why wasn't her teacher pounding Naruto into the ground? Why wasn't she reprimanding him on getting engaged to a girl like this? Couldn't she see how much of a monster she was? "It's a pleasure to meet you, Tsunade-sama," Shiroi politely said. "Ho! Ho! And she's polite too. You could learn something from her gaki." Tsunade grinned, giving Naruto a pointed stare. Her fellow blonde merely snickered at her. Shiroi silently giggled at Tsunade's now annoyed expression at hearing the blonde snicker. Oh, how her Naruto could giggle no matter what situation he's in. Meanwhile, Sakura's brain is still trying to reboot after seeing Tsunade's reaction to Shiroi. "Folks, I think we just broke Sakura, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So tell me, Gaki, what do you want exactly?" Tsunade asked, getting right down to business. Naruto gave her an innocent look. "Why, Oba-chan, I have no idea what you'll dash. You wouldn't come to my office when you get back your training trip without at least going for some ramen, or you would at least wait a day. So, what do you want? Tsunade interrupted, giving the blonde a smug look on calling him out. Naruto frowned for a moment before he chuckled. You know me so well, Bachan. He grinned. He gestured Shiroi to come stand beside. Shiroi, seeing no reason to not listen to her favorite blonde, moved to stand beside him. Once she did. The blonde gently took her hand into his. She smiled and gripped his hand. As you can see, Oba-chan, there's going to be two of us living in the same place. And I don't think my small apartment is big enough for the two of us. The blonde explained. So you want to buy a new house or apartment? Tsunade quickly deduced, though inside her mind a chibi version of her was happily dancing while piles of money were laying around her. Naruto nodded at Tsunade's assessment. Yeah, so could you allow me and Shiroi to browse through a couple houses you may have? He asked. Tsunade silently took out a folder labeled Homes for Sale and offered it to the younger blonde. Naruto took the folder, and shortly after she and Shiroi were browsing through the house that caught their attention, with some comments like, oh, this house seems nice, or, wow, this one is actually impressive, and they actually call this a house. That isn't even a homeless shelter. Tsunade's eye twitched as the comments went on and on, and on. Seriously, every time Shiroi opened her mouth, it was to insult a house, or say it was impressive before she would turn the page and look at more. Seriously, a lot of those houses were expensive, and she just brushed them off. What were the girls' standards? Though Naruto seemed to notice Tsunade's annoyed state, as he gave her an amused look, Tsunade rose an eyebrow. Before she noticed that Shiroi was giving her the same amused look, she was insulting the houses on purpose. That little. Tsunade took a deep breath to calm herself, and she glared at Jiraya and the hidden AMBU when she heard them snickering. Several minutes later, Shiroi and the blonde were finally done browsing the houses they had. You have a lot of good houses, Oba-chan, but Shiroi and I have found a house that we would like to purchase, Naruto said, handing Tsunade the picture of a white 3-story house with the most beautiful gardens and a balcony on the top floor. The house had 2 bathrooms, 3 rooms on each floor, a kitchen, a large living room, an attic, and a large basement. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at the blonde. This was one of the most expensive houses they had, and a house that almost all of the villagers have tried to buy. But the house couldn't be purchased because it was way too expensive even by shinobi standards. And because that was the house Minato was secretly building should he ever have a large family. Not that anyone knew that. After all, the only people who knew about the house being built by the Yondaime was her, Jiraya, Kakashi, and Hiruzen the Sandaime Hokage. You sure you want this house, Gaki? Tsunade asked, even though she was planning on giving the blonde the house for free anyway. Of course we would like to purchase it, Tsunade-sama, Shiroi politely said. Tsunade gave a slight grin. Well, you two are in luck. You see, the house was created by the Yondaime, and it was meant to be given to you, Naruto. She said, the message was very clear. It was created by your father, so it's your right. Naruto hummed for a few minutes, before he looked at Shiroi's expectant look. The message she was giving him was clear. Take the house. It would be a perfect opportunity to be close with your parents. The blonde smiled before he gave Tsunade a short nod. Tsunade smiled as she had seen the interaction with the two. To think that they would be able to interact like that without actually speaking was incredible. All right, Gaki, Tsunade began, as she reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small key. Take good care of the house. Also be prepared for extra attention from the villagers. She warned. Naruto rose an eyebrow. Why Bachan? He asked with a confused expression. Tsunade handed it because almost the whole village has had their eyes on the house. But they could never afford it. So you might be getting some envious looks from them. Shiroi gave a small smirk. I'm pretty sure we can handle it, Tsunade-sama, she politely and confidently said. Tsunade gave a small smirk to the white-haired girl. I'm sure you can. Now get you boyfriend and get out of here. I need to talk with Jiraya, she said. The duo of both Shiroi and Naruto shrugged, before they walked past the still shock-frozen Sakura and left the door. But before they, Naruto threw in one last sentence that made Tsunade want to bang her head on the desk. Yo, Bachan, as thanks for the house. The secret to defeating paperwork is shadow clones. He gave Tsunade a grin before he closed the door. Tsunade felt the world around her stop, and she wanted to bang her head on the ground and say how stupid she was. But she could not when witnesses were here. She could do that later. Sakura, Tsunade yelled towards her still shocked student. Huh. Sakura blinked in a daze. She was having a weird dream that Naruto was actually getting married. Sakura, get out of here, will ya? I need to speak with Jiraya about something. And you're in the way, Tsunade said to her now attentive student. All right, I understand, Tsunade-sama. Sakura bowed, before she left wondering if the dream she had was real. Poor Sakura. She can't even accept the fact that Naruto is now engaged. Sure that her student was now gone, the busted blonde turned towards Jiraya. Now think you can explain to me just how strong Naruto is now. And Kakashi, get in here, she yelled shortly after her sentence. She didn't have to wait long, as the window to her office opened and in entered the masked jonin. Yo, he lazily greeted as he moved to stand in front of the Hokage's desk, though Tsunade could detect a hint of shock within his eyes. Luxie arrived when she said Naruto was engaged. Before I begin, I have to ask Haim, could you get rid of your AMBU? Jiraiya seriously asked. Tsunade only made a single hand sign, and the AMBU suddenly phased into existence before they all blurred out of the room. Is that all of them? The perverted sage asked. Tsunade knew why he asked, as there was another presence in the room besides Kakashi, her, and the pervert. Silently, the busted blonde nodded. Jiraiya narrowed as before he blurred. A loud snapping sound was heard, and both Tsunade and Kakashi turned to see Jiraiya holding the neck of a dead AMBU with the root insignia on its mask. The body glowed for a minute before it burst into flames, turning the entire body to ash. Looks like Danzo is getting bolder. Jiraiya grunted. It seems so. Kakashi uttered, staring at the dead root AMBU. Tsunade scoffed. Sometimes I just want to kill that war hawk, even if I have no evidence to support it, she darkly said. Jiraiya grunted in agreement before he moved back to stand before Tsunade. Now about our favorite blonde, he said, his attitude taking on a fatherly look to his eyes. I myself am also curious, Jiraiya-sama, Kakashi said, looking at the toad sage in curiosity. Just get on with it, Tsunade impatiently yelled. Jiraiya smirked for a moment. Naruto has long since surpassed me, he said, pride brimming in his voice. Tsunade and Kakashi looked at him in disbelief before Kakashi spoke. You're kidding, right, Jiraiya-sama? He asked. I'm not kidding, Kakashi. That Gaki has surpassed me. In tactics and strategy, he's above your level, Kakashi, by a large margin if I do say so myself. In ninjutsu, he's at least mid-level Kage. In genjutsu, he's high-level genin, but that's understandable given his chakra reserves. His taijutsu is low-level Kage, and his kenjutsu is high-level Kage. He's mastered sunjutsu, and he has control of 2 tails of the Kyuubi's chakra, the perverted sage explained. All in all, he almost at either Uchiha Madara's level, or the Shodan Hokage's level. He finished. To say both Kakashi and Tsunade were shocked would be an understatement. The little blonde boy, who claimed he would be Hokage no matter what, was almost as strong as 2 of the greatest shinobi in history. To think he would come so far. It made Tsunade and Kakashi smile. So you're saying that instead of genin he should be a jonin? Tsunade asked, the smile not leaving her face. Jiraiya gave a short nod. Tsunade closed her eyes for several moments before she opened them. Kakashi, once Naruto has finished settling in, I want you to test him in combat in order for to receive jonin rank. I want to see his prowess myself, Tsunade declared. I understand, Tsunade-sama, Kakashi curtly replied, a feeling of anticipation welling up inside him. Tsunade gave a satisfied nod, before she returned her attention back to Jiraiya. Now, what can you tell me about Shiroi? She curiously asked. Kakashi curiously looked at Jiraiya, wondering about the girl who was apparently going to marry his former student. I can tell you the Tsunade Kakashi, trying to separate her from Naruto is a death wish. The white-haired Sannin ominously stated. She may seem like a well-mannered, kind, and polite girl, but once you've made her angry, she does a complete personality change. She becomes dark, sadistic, cruel, and most importantly, merciless. Jiraya shuddered. Kakashi and Tsunade both glanced at each other before they looked at the toad sage in worry. She can get angry, but when you've truly pissed her off. There was only 2 times in which that happened. The first was when she learned of Naruto's life in the village dash. Both Kakashi and Tsunade stiffened. When she learned of this, I was certain you could feel her rage from at least 4 miles away. Naruto was able to calm her down, but I could still feel the suppressed rage that was within her. The second time was when Naruto overworked himself in his training. So me and her went to get some supplies dash. Both Kakashi and Tsunade noticed how Jiraiya shuddered again. A civilian began hitting on her, trying to get her on a date of course. She politely denied, saying she already had a boyfriend. But people are stubborn, and he made the mistake of insulting Naruto. I can still remember the blank look she had on her face. Then she asked me to go on ahead. I did. But I jumped on a roof to see how the interaction would go dash. Here he took a deep breath. I didn't even see it, but 1 second the guy was standing. The next he was on the ground screaming in pain, as Shiroi literally ripped off his arm from his socket. Before I could stop her, she ripped off his other arm. Then she crushed him until nothing remained but ashes. When I stopped her, I saw the look in her eyes dash. Jiraya's eyes glazed over, and once again he shuddered. The look in her eyes was of a feral rage so hot that it could have made even the Kyuubi whimper in pure fear. Not only that, but there was also a gleam of dark sadistic amusement in there. But rage was the most definite, and the cruel smile on her face spoke volumes. He finished. Slowly Jiraiya leaned forward. This is a warning that should be taken seriously, Tsunade. Do not make Shiroi truly angry, and pray that the villagers don't do anything stupid. Make no mistake, she is a threat, but only if provoked. He seriously warned. We understand, Jiraiya, Tsunade said, while Kakashi merely pulled out his Ika. Though Tsunade could see he wasn't paying attention to the book at all. Jiraiya nodded in a satisfied manner. Well, it's time for me to perform some research. He grinned in a perverse manner, before he jumped out the window before Tsunade could yell at him. I should get going as well, Tsunade-sama. Kakashi lazily said, I do have to prepare for my fight with Naruto, do I not? He stated, before he turned and silently left the room. Tsunade sighed, before she reached into her cabinet and pulled out an entire bottle of sake. She poured herself a cup, before she sipped the sake and released a content sigh. She looked out the window to look over the entire village, and she let out a weary sigh. She hoped, prayed. No, she begged Kami to not let the villagers do anything stupid, because she feared that the village was already on thin ice as it was. Shiroi watched with a dazed expression of love and affection for Naruto as he devoured his bowl of ramen at a steady but still slightly fast pace with a childish smile on his face. That childish smile made him seem so cute in her eyes. Yesterday, after their meeting with the female Hokage, both her and Naruto immediately went towards their newly purchased house. During their walk through the village to reach their new home, seeing as it was near the clan district of Konoha, the villagers once again gave them looks. Some gave friendly waves. Some of the females looked at Naruto in a bit of lust, and they licked their lips hungrily. One quick burst of killing intent, and a dark glare from Shiroi made them think twice about looking at Naruto like that again. The same could be said for Shiroi as males were giving her lustful stares and glared at Naruto in envy. One was even brave enough to try and walk up to Shiroi. One look of pure killing intent mixed with a bit of Kyuubi's chakra from Naruto, however, was enough for him to pale and nearly lose control of his bladder. When they finally reached their new home, they immediately unlocked and entered it. The house, in Shiroi's opinion, was more than big enough. It was simply both beautiful and amazing, To think that Naruto's own father built this large home. He must have created it in the event that he would be expecting a large family. An image of a chibi yondaime running around and building this house all on his own, and failing multiple times, ran through Naruto's head. He snorted at the very thought. After they reached their new home, the blonde and his wife-to-be set out to unsealing all of the furniture they obtained through in their travels. Stuff like couches, chairs, shelves, cases, a fridge, and various other things they had while they were traveling the nations. After unsealing all of that, they got to work, with the help of a couple shadow clones, on placing everything in order and whatnot. Though when Shiroi pulled out a scroll labeled, "If Dolls," Naruto immediately paled in fear. The QB, if possible, paled as well when he witnessed the scroll. The two immediately began praying to Kami that she wouldn't open the scroll, all while Altair could at all possible sweat dropped. Why were the two of them so damn terrified of a couple of dolls, you may ask? Well, the reason was oh so simple and a bit strange if you think about it. You see, when Shiroi is extremely bored and she has nothing to occupy her time, she has a habit of creating dolls. Not just any dolls, mind you. These dolls were special per se. She would first create her dolls with a vast assortment of things she had and get to the complex and difficult process of creating the dolls. Then after she was done creating the dolls, she would place a bit of her Yuki into them, thus making them jerk to life. To life! Both Kyuubi and Naruto were fascinated with the little doll that had come to life. That is, until it lunged at them at speeds only rivaled by the best of jonins. The doll then latched onto his face and proceeded to try and choke the blonde to death. Not to mention that it was extremely difficult trying to wrench the damn thing off of him. The damn thing had the strength of grown man. For crying out loud, and with Shiroi's Yuki running through its veins. Yeah, you get the picture. It took the blonde at least several minutes to get the thing off, and Shiroi's laughs were not helping at all. Even the QB was panicking at the thought of his container dying. To a fucking doll. Not to mention, if Naruto died, he would die. So the QB, much to Naruto's shock, was cheering for the blonde to beat the shit out of the demon doll. Naruto wasn't one to disappoint, so with the help of Senjutsu Chakra, even if it was a bit overkill, managed to rip the doll off of him. However, the doll proved to be a worthy opponent, as it managed to slip out of the blonde's grip and run towards his kunai pouch. Naruto exclaimed a "what the F Yusuke," with the QB agreeing with him, before he ran around the area screaming like a little girl, while the doll chased him around with a gleeful expression. All while Shiroi was laughing her ass off as Naruto played with her harmless doll. By some miracle, a tree branch broke and fell right on top of the doll's head. Naruto, not one to pass up on the opportunity, immediately grabbed the branch and began to pound away at the little doll, all while saying things like, "You do not fuck with Uzumaki Namikaze's Naruto, bitch." The ever-famous "you like that." And finally my favorite, "who the bitch now, motherfucker?" Databeo. Of course, had the blonde been paying attention, he would have noticed the doll's silent screams of pain as the blonde repeatedly bashed with the branch. There were even tears coming from the doll's eyes. It was kind of pitiful, really. Wait, since when did dolls cry? Oh well, this is anime. Anything is possible. Anyway, you can understand Kyuubi's and Naruto's reluctance to have any of her dolls more than 10 feet away from them. Have any of them unsealed for that matter. Thankfully, Shiroi didn't unseal the blasted dolls, something both Kyuubi and Naruto repeatedly thanked Kami for. After that, both Naruto and Shiroi quickly finished up with their furniture and shortly went to bed. The next morning they got up, took a shower together, got dressed, ate breakfast comprising of eggs, bacon, pancakes, and orange juice. Orange juice. After that, with nothing to do, Shiroi asked to have a tour of the entire village. Naruto happily complied, seeing as he wanted to show his mate around his home, and promptly showed her around the village to the best of his ability. He showed her the memorial stone, the Hokage mountain, a couple of famous restaurants in the village. However, Shiroi quickly lost whatever interest she had in the village. It wasn't that she didn't like the village, it's just that she had no type of interest in learning about the place that mentally and physically harmed her lover. In a way, she was neutral to the village. However, should the village do something that she deemed as a threat to Naruto, then she would destroy them utterly. Naruto, seeing Shiroi lose interest in Konoha, thought about what he could show her that would be of at least some interest to her. Though when he looked up, to his surprise, it was already noon, and by coincidence, they were in front of Ichiraku's ramen. The blonde immediately exclaimed that it was ramen time, and grabbed Shiroi's hand, and he seemed to teleport right towards the shop. That was something that shocked the villagers, seeing as it reminded them of the Yellow Flash. But they dismissed the thought of Naruto being the son of the Yondaime. It just wasn't possible, right? When they entered the shop, Naruto loudly greeted the two owners of the shop, Ichiraku Ayame and her father Ichiraku Twechi. Both Ichirakus were happy to see the blonde after such a long time, and eagerly returned the blonde's greeting. The blonde introduced Shiroi to the both of them. Though both Ichirakus were shocked to learn that both Shiroi and Naruto were engaged, they were nonetheless happy for the blonde, and expressed their happiness for the blonde by making them both a bowl of ramen on the house. Naruto-kun, you slow down a little more, Shiroi scolded, though only amusement was in her tone. Naruto turned to look at Shiroi with the dreaded puppy eyes. But Shiroi-chan, it's ramen, he whimpered. Shiroi stared blankly at her blonde lover, before she lightly shook her head. And it will still be there, so you don't have to eat so fast. And besides, don't you want to savor it? She said, giving the blonde an amused look when she saw him freeze. Shiroi-chan, you are absolutely right. Ramen like this should be savored, the blonde loudly exclaimed before he began to eat his ramen at a much slower rate. Shiroi gave a smile before she turned back to her bowl of ramen. She rose an eyebrow when she saw the shocked expressions on both Ayame's and her father's faces. Something wrong? She asked. Impossible. You managed to get Naruto to slow down on eating ramen. How? Twechi uttered, his brain too shocked to believe the sight before him. Shiroi rose a delicate eyebrow before she spoke in a slight superior tone. Whatever do you mean, Ichiraku-san? She questioned, taking an elegant bite of her own noodles. Ayame spoke up, seeing as her father was still in a shocked state. Well, me and Tsunade have been trying to get Naruto to slow down on his eating habits, but we could never get him to. It was really frustrating for us, as it was extremely difficult to teach him mannerisms. Ayame explained. This Shiroi did not bother to hide the superior tone in her voice as she spoke. Well, I'm proud to say that I know how Naruto thinks. As such, it would make this, that I would know what it takes for the blonde to listen. The pride and a tiny bit of arrogance in her tone wasn't missed by Ayame, who slightly twitched at the girl's small arrogance. Even so, it has always been a challenge to teach Naruto things, seeing as he had such a short attention span. Ayame responded, her tone taking on a challenging glint to them. Shiroi's eyes slightly narrowed. Well, I can assure that for someone such as I, it was remarkably easy to teach Naruto some manners, even if he was a bit of a brute back then. The silvery white-haired girl replied, her chin proudly held high. Oh, is that so? Ayame began. Well, I imagine it must have been a bit difficult for you, seeing as Naruto never really paid attention to me when I tried to teach him, she stated. Well, obviously you weren't doing a very good job. After all, while I was teaching him, he was paying attention to me, or than I even imagined, Shiroi asserted. While both Shiroi and Ayame were having their argument, Naruto, Twechi, Kyubi, and even Altair all watched and promptly sweat dropped. Seriously, the two were almost acting like rivals, or something of the sort. Naruto, you girlfriend isn't afraid to speak her mind, is she? Twechi commented, and he gave a cold shiver when he saw her glance at him sharply. Damn, she had ears. Yeah, but that's one of the things I love most about Shiroi-chan, the blonde warmly said, making Shiroi, who was listening with her sharp hearing, unintentionally flush slightly. Before any of their conversations and arguments could go any further, an AMBU phased into existence and bowed towards Naruto, catching not only the blonde's attention, but also Shiroi's and everyone else's. Naruto-san, Hokage-sama wishes for you to be in Training Ground 12 in exactly 4 minutes, the AMBU stated, before he disappeared in a flutter of leaves. Everyone felt a little confused on why Tsunade would want to see the blonde, but they chose not to dwell on it, and instead focused on finishing whatever they were doing. Once Shiroi and Naruto were done with their ramen, the blonde and his fiancée quickly bade the Ichirakas farewell, before they began to make their way towards Training Ground 12, all while wondering what Tsunade wanted. Unknown to both of them, however, Naruto would soon be facing old friend and teacher to him. It was time for Naruto's joning test. It was time for Hatake Kakashi to finally witness just how much his former has grown. It was time for the battle between Kakashi and Naruto. Naruto and Shiroi arrived in Training Ground 12, only to find both Tsunade and Jiraya standing in the middle of the field, both having impassive faces. Naruto shared a glance with Shiroi, before they both moved to stand in front of the two legendary Sanins, with the female Sannin being a Hokage. Once the two of them were in front of the Sannin, it was strangely silent before Naruto spoke. "Hey, Tsunade-bachan, what are we here for?" the blonde asked, an eyebrow raised in confusion. Shiroi merely settled for staring at them in curiosity. "Naruto, soon you are going to be having a test of sorts to see if you are skilled enough to achieve jonin rank," Tsunade began. Naruto and Shiroi blinked owlishly at that. "Well, what's the test, bachan?" Naruto said, a grin crossing his features. Before Tsunade could speak, however, another voice answered the blonde's question. "Your test, Naruto, is to defeat me in combat." Both Naruto and Shiroi spun around, and lo and behold, the blonde was greeted with the sight of his old teacher. However, Kakashi was not wearing the typical jonin attire. Instead, the masked jonin now wore a full black body suit completed with his mask. He wore AMBU issue armor, completed with a tanto strapped to his back. His stance and the way he moved showed that he was going to take this fight seriously. And finally, he did not have his usual Ika book to read. "Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto uttered, before a giant and nearly feral grin erupted from his face. "That's right, Naruto. In order to achieve your jonin rank, you have to beat Kakashi," Tsunade exclaimed, her eyes narrowing seriously as she gazed at both of her shinobi. "This match will begin shortly after I say it does. The rules are simple. There are none," the female Hokage stated. "I understand, bachan," Naruto proclaimed, cracking his neck and knuckles. "I understand as well, Tsunade-sama," Kakashi confirmed, not taking his eyes off the blonde. "Very well. Begin," the older blonde exclaimed before she and Jiraya blurred out of sight. Shiroi stayed for a moment longer and silently wished the blonde luck, before she blurred out of sight. The atmosphere was tense and heavy as both Naruto and Kakashi stared each other down. For Kakashi, this was the time to finally see just how truly powerful his former student was, to see if his student has surpassed him. For Naruto, this was a chance to show Kakashi just how much he had grown, to show just how much he had improved since he left all those years ago, to show Kakashi that he was no longer a child. Where does the time go? Huh, Naruto, the last time we faced off like this, you were still my pupil, Kakashi mused. Naruto merely stayed silent before he slowly moved his hands to grip his robes. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed before he slowly moved his hand forwards towards his headband. Naruto removed his robes, revealing his dark orange mesh shirt, black pants, his black boots, and Altair sheathed by his side. The blonde carelessly threw his robes aside and tightened the sash around his waist, making sure Altair was firmly set at his side. Kakashi lifted up his headband to reveal his very own Sharingan, the very thing that allowed him to copy over 1,000 techniques, the very thing that earned him the nickname Sharingan no Kakashi. Both Kakashi and Naruto stared at each other for a single moment, before they both suddenly blurred. A shock was felt in the middle of the field as both Naruto and Kakashi reappeared, their fists firmly pressed against each other's, trying to overpower the other. Kakashi's eyes narrowed before he suddenly twisted his body and allowed the blonde to move forward. Then the masked jonin attempted to kick the blonde in the back. However, the blonde proved he would be a worthy opponent as he quickly shifted his feet and blocked Kakashi's incoming kick with his forearm. The blonde then gripped the jonin's leg tightly, and his other hand shot forwards to the jonin's chest. However, proved that he deserved the rank of elite jonin as he leaned his entire body back, allowing the blonde's hand move over him before he kicked himself off the ground and spinned in the air. He then propelled a chakra-enhanced kick towards the blonde, who held a firm grip on his hand. The blonde narrowed his eyes before he let go of the jonin's leg and jumped back several feet. However, in doing so, he fell right for Kakashi's trap. Several shadow clones which Kakashi had created earlier sprang into action and quickly caught the blonde, one grabbing his legs, another grabbing his left arm, while another grabbed his other arm, and the last one got him in a fell Nelson. Naruto huffed in annoyance before he noticed Kakashi charging in a strike. However, the blonde was having none of that, and he quickly activated his wind field to destroy the masked jonin's clones. The blonde was pleased to note the winding of Kakashi's eyes before the blonde charged in with his elbow already prepared to smash against the jonin's face. Kakashi's eyes widened as the speed he misjudged Naruto's speed, and as such did not have time to prepare for a substitution. The blonde's elbow met with the jonin's face with incredible force, making some of the bones in the jonin's body creak. Before the jonin could even attempt to gain some breathing room, the blonde grabbed the jonin by the fabric of his bodysuit, and with a chakra-enhanced punch, sent the jonin flying several meters away. However, the blonde was far from finished, and he used his wind field to increase his speed dramatically. He almost seemed to teleport right to Kakashi's location before he began to brutally kick the jonin away for several moments, before he ended it with a final chakra-enhanced kick, sending Kakashi propelling all the way across the field, before harshly smashing into a boulder. The jonin coughed as he forcibly removed himself from the now human-sized hole in the boulder. The masked jonin glared at his former student before he blurred through several hand seals. "Fire style, grand fireball," the jonin exclaimed, before a massive fireball shot from his mouth and towards the blonde's location. Naruto narrowed his eyes before he blurred through several hand seals. "Water style, water phoenix," the blonde exclaimed, and before Kakashi's very eyes water from the atmosphere began to converge around the blonde, before it began to take shape and form a beautiful and massive phoenix. The phoenix gave off a mighty screech before it propelled itself towards the masked jonin's fireball. The two techniques clashed and promptly exploded outwards, creating a heavy mist. Kakashi warily kept his ears open, as this mist would become quite the advantage to his blonde student. However, much to his surprise, the mist was fading much faster than he had ever anticipated. When the mist cleared, he was able to see his blonde student calmly observing him. However, now that the jonin actually paid more attention to the blonde with his Sharingan eye, he was able to see wind-natured chakra coating the area around the blonde. It was then Kakashi realized that this apparent wind field was the reason why his clones from earlier were destroyed, and why the mist was fading faster than normal. The masked jonin was distracted from his thoughts on the matter when he noticed his blonde student reaching for the blade sheathed at his side. When the blonde unsheathed the blade, Kakashi was immediately captivated by the blade. A smooth sliver blade that looked powerful enough to break through even the strongest of metals, eagle wings as the hand guard, an eagle's head as the pommel. It was truly a beautiful blade. All of the training I ever had. Naruto began. Kakashi's ears perked up in interest when he heard Naruto speak. All of the techniques I ever learned. All of the fights I have ever been in were all very much exciting. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. Just what was his former student getting at? But none of it excites my blood more than when I drawing Altair, the blonde exclaimed, before he suddenly rocketed from his position. The former AMBU's eyes widened and he barely had enough time to draw his tanto to block the blonde's vertical strike. The tanto in his clash with the blonde's blade. And much to Kakashi's shock, his tanto began to creak and crack as it clashed with the blonde's blade. Kakashi's tanto clashed with the blonde's sword once more, before it shortly shattered, much to Kakashi's horror. Kakashi was forced to jump back, lest he ave his chest slashed open, but was a bit too late, and received a deep gash to his right arm for his troubles. Kakashi immediately channeled chakra into the wound to stop it from bleeding, but much to his shock, it continued to bleed. The masked jonin focused his Sharingan eye onto the blonde's sword, and much to his shock, he discovered the blade was not only covered with wind chakra, but also the Kyuubi's chakra. But that wasn't possible. The blonde wasn't using the Kyuubi's chakra at all, unless the blade itself contained some of the Kyuubi's chakra. However, Kakashi's wasn't allowed to even dwell on that theory, as the blonde lunged at the masked jonin and attempted to stab the jonin with Altair. However, the jonin now knew one thing. He absolutely could not allow the blonde to stab him with that sword. So Kakashi, with all his might and effort, did his very best to dodge most of the blonde's strikes. However, he could not dodge them all and received several cuts and slashes as a result. The masked jonin panted as he took in his situation. He was running low on chakra. He had a deep gash to his arm that will somewhat stop him from weaving hand signs in the speed he wanted. He was wounded all over, and his opponent. It was then that Kakashi came to the startling realization that he had not managed to give his opponent a single scratch. The blonde looked fine. Even more than that, he looked as if he were taking a stroll in the park. Wait! Kakashi still had that technique as well. Naruto, did you know that the yondaime was my sensei? Kakashi asked, channeling chakra into his left hand. Naruto rose a single eyebrow before he spoke. Yeah, I knew my Two-sen was your sensei. The blonde placed Altair in its sheath, making sure to pat the blade on the pommel for a job well done, making the blade pulse in contentment. Kakashi's eyes widened in shock for a moment. The blonde found out that his sensei was a son. If so, did that mean that Naruto now knew that he was his god brother? Kakashi slightly shook his head. No, he failed to protect and be there for the blonde when he was little. He didn't deserve the honor of being Naruto's god brother. Instead, Kakashi chose to focus on the last technique of this fight. Yes, well, before Minato-sensei died, he taught me one last jutsu. Kakashi explained before he held up his left hand, and there spinning rapidly was a Rasengan. Naruto's eyes widened for a moment before he chuckled, and soon his chuckles turned into full-blown laughter. Kakashi rose an eyebrow. Did he just break Naruto? Kakashi-sensei, I had no idea you could use the Rasengan. To be honest, I kinda hoped you did. The blonde exclaimed. Oh, and why is that, Naruto? The masked jonin asked. Because now I can test this against an ordinary Rasengan, the blonde said, before a Rasengan appeared in his hand. Only it was whiter and had tiny blades of wind fluttering about it. This was the wind style Rasengan. Kakashi's eyes widened in disbelief. Naruto, is that? The masked jonin trailed off. Yes, this is the completed version of the Rasengan. The blonde confirmed. A smile lit the jonin's face. Not that the blonde could see it. In Kakashi's eyes, the ghostly figure of his sensei appeared behind the blonde, and he gave him a grin. Let's finish this, Naruto. After all, when you win, I have to get ready to congratulate you, Kakashi said, an eye smile working away onto his face. Right, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto exclaimed, right before the two charged right at each other. As their two techniques clashed, Kakashi couldn't help but smile as Naruto's Rasengan ripped through his effortlessly. Naruto, you have truly grown. I am proud to have been your sensei. So thank you, Naruto. Thank you for giving me the chance to know you, for all the good times we shared. The masked jonin happily thought, as he held his now damaged hand. You win, Naruto. You are no longer a genin. Now you are a full-ranked jonin. "Do us proud, Naruto," Kakashi happily said. Naruto grinned, an embarrassed blush on his face at the praise. However, he smiled brightly when Shiroi flung herself at the blonde and trapped him in an iron hug. "Naruto-kun, that fight was amazing," she exclaimed, rubbing her cheek against his face, making the blonde purr. And the QB was grinning like a maniac who had just found out the entire world was his for the taking. Kakashi, meanwhile, moved towards the female Hokage and the Toad Sannin, who were watching with smiles on their faces. "Tsunade-sama, Jiraiya-sama," he greeted. Jiraiya gave a grin at Kakashi before he spoke. "So what do you two think?" he asked, though he already knew. "I believe that Naruto deserves the rank of jonin. He has proven to be an excellent shinobi, and he will be extremely valuable in the field," Kakashi surmised, his trademark "I smile" on his face. Tsunade grinned. "I have given him the rank of jonin regardless of what you would have said, Kakashi," the female Hokage said, releasing a laugh at the sight of Shiroi giving Naruto a kiss, though both Kakashi and Jiraiya released a perverted giggle, right before Tsunade bashed both of their heads in. "Ah yes, life was good, was it not?" Kakashi gave a slight wince as he sat down on one of the many chairs in the Jonin lounge. The injuries he received from his fight with Naruto were still there, though they did feel quite a bit with Tsunade's help. It did little to erase the pain once he exited from his battle mode, as he liked to call it. After the battle with Naruto, Kakashi went to immediately get some rest and tend to his various wounds. Who would have thought that the blonde would become so powerful in such a short amount of time? It made Kakashi smile in pride. That is, until he realized that he had no right to feel whatever pride he may have been feeling at the moment. After all, he only actually taught the blonde the tree walking exercise, and it was when they were all way in over their heads. To Kakashi, he believed that the one with the most training should be trained first, as it would be at least 10 times easier. However, that cost him dearly. His laziness and inaction with his team, Team 7, led to them slowly falling apart. At first it began with Sasuke and his anger at losing to his brother. Then Sasuke began to use Naruto as a measuring stick, and when he saw how much progress the blonde was making, he began to get frustrated. This led to Sasuke envying the blonde, and his anger continued to grow, until he snapped and challenged Naruto to a duel. When Sasuke saw how much damage the Rasengan did, and how it was better than his Chidori, Sasuke had gotten angrier. But Kakashi never paid any attention to it. He had just assumed Sasuke needed to blow off some steam and left at that. He did have a few words with Jiraiya about teaching Naruto the Rasengan, but he came to realize that he was being hypocritical. After all, he did teach Sasuke the Chidori. It was with Reality Bitch slapping him in the face. Did Kakashi realize that the reason that Team 7 fell apart was because of his own laziness? Thinking about it now, he didn't really teach them anything, did he? And whatever he did teach, he spent most of the time with Sasuke, as he was easier to teach. Kakashi gave a sad chuckle. Enko was right. He really wasn't that good at being a teacher. His own laziness and habits were the reasons why his team fell apart. He had assumed that since his teacher made teaching so easy that it would be simple for him. However, it was more difficult than he imagined. Teaching his students tree walking during a C-rank turned A-rank mission? What was he thinking at the time? Kakashi didn't know whether to be ashamed of himself or be extremely glad that his team survived the ordeal. He was certain that Minato was rolling in his grave at the moment, probably threatening to give him a training session of a lifetime when he joined him in the afterlife. Kakashi gave a sad chuckle. He wonders what his sensei would say about his laziness. He was taken out of his thoughts when he heard the door to the Jonin lounge open, and in entered Sarutobi Asuma, the son of the Sandaime Hokage. Yuhi Kurenai, Asuma's lover, as it was freaking obvious. Might Guy, Kakashi's self-proclaimed rival. Mitarashi Enko, the snake mistress of Konoha, and finally Miro no Ibiki, Konoha's best interrogator. Kurenai and Asuma were chatting quietly, while Enko and Ibiki were speaking with sadistic looks on their faces. Kakashi shivered. Looks like they found a new toy to play with. Kakashi pitied the poor fool who was at their mercy. Kakashi did the best he could to remain hidden, There was no way he was going to let his fellow jonin see the state he was in. They would never let him live it down. He prayed to Kami that they wouldn't notice him. However, it seemed Kami decided to fuck with the masked jonin, as Guy instantly spotted him. YOSH Kakashi, my eternal rival. How is your flames of youth today? Guy exclaimed as he blurred towards his eternal rival. Everyone's attention now turned towards Kakashi and Guy, as the green spandex wearing jonin picked up Kakashi and gave him a manly hug, crushing the life out of the poor masked jonin. Oh, Kami-sama, help me. He's gonna infect me with his flames of youth. Damn it, it's already happening. Kakashi thought in both despair and horror. The other jonin, seeing Kakashi's horrified expression, chuckled and snickered amongst themselves. Guy stopped hugging his eternal rival and gave him a hard pat on the back, making Kakashi wince in pain, as that was where his back impacted into a boulder that Naruto slammed him into yesterday. Kakashi, is something wrong? Asuma asked, seeing Kakashi wince. When Asuma said that sentence, every jonin in the room looked more closely at Kakashi, and they all finally noticed the various injuries he had. Holy shit, Kakashi. The fuck happened to you? Anko asked, raising an eyebrow. Kakashi sighed tiredly. He wanted to keep the specifics about his match with Naruto a secret, but now. Oh, well, what's the worst that could happen? Well, it's like this. And so Kakashi began explaining his match with the one and only Uzumaki Naruto, and as the other jonins heard about the match, their eyes were slowly getting wider and wider. Deep in the underground of Konoha, a ANB with a blank face mask and the insignia for Root slowly moved through the corridor. Several moments later, he entered a large room with a massive platform in the middle. There were at least 3 walkways, and in the center stood a single old and heavily bandaged individual. The Root ANBU briskly moved towards his master and knelt before the elder individual. Danzo-sama, I return to inform you of outcome of the match between Hatake Kakashi and Uzumaki Naruto. The Root ANBU said, not even a single tone of emotion in his voice. Shimura Danzo, one of the elders of Konoha and the rival of Sarutobi Hiruzen, opened his cold and wary eyes, and he gave his Root ninja a single motion to continue. Uzumaki Naruto, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, has proven to be a powerful opponent for Hatake Kakashi. His Tai Jutsu was superb, at least on par with Might Guy of the Leaf. His ninjutsu has proven to be quite powerful, even though he only used 2 jutsus from what I've seen. He is able to draw water from the atmosphere like the Naidame Hokage, and it appears he has created a new version Rasengan, the jutsu created by the Yondaime Hokage. The Root ANBU paused, allowing Danzo to digest the information he had been told. At Danzo's nod, the ANBU continued. When Uzumaki Naruto drew his blade from his sheath, he dominated the Kenjutsu battle between him and Hatake Kakashi. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki, from my observations, has become a powerful and fearsome shinobi, as he could have defeated Hatake Kakashi at a moment's notice. The Root ANBU finished. Danzo slowly raised an eyebrow before he indulged in his curiosity a bit further. What do you mean by that? The bandaged elder asked. Uzumaki Naruto was clearly holding back a majority of his strength during his battle with Hatake Kakashi. By my observations, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki should be at least Kage level, as during the battle Hatake Kakashi had not once laid a finger on the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. The Root ANBU explained. Danzo hummed and thought for a moment. To think that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki would become so powerful in such a short amount of time. It was obvious that the Jinchuriki's talents were being stunted during his time in the academy. After all, the Jinchuriki's lineage was that of the powerful and dangerous Uzumaki clan, and the one and only Namikaze Minato, the greatest shinobi of his generation. As a matter of fact, Danzo was certain that should the Jinchuriki had been trained properly, he would have been Rookie of the Year instead of the Uchiha brat. To be honest, Danzo never really liked the Uchiha brat and his attitude, and Hamura and Koharu saw to it that the brat was handed everything on a silver platter. That was poor judgment on their part. Nonetheless, Danzo knew the Jinchuriki would become a powerful shinobi provided he received a proper teacher. When Kakashi became the Jinchuriki's teacher, Danzo had hoped that the blonde would become powerful, that way he could approach the blonde about joining Root once he was at an exceptional level. But to his disappointment, Kakashi's laziness and his habits didn't serve any actual purpose in training the blonde. When the third round of the Chunin exams were beginning, he resolved to speak with the blonde about giving him training, and possibly waver his trust in Hiruzen. But to his dismay, Jiraya got to the Jinchuriki first. And as the blonde trained with Jiraya, Danzo knew that the chances of getting the blonde into Root were slim at best. "Danzo-sama?" the Root AMBU asked, a questioning tone in his voice, unintentionally breaking Danzo out of his thoughts. "Dismissed," Danzo ordered. Not even a moment after he uttered that word, the Root AMBU phased away from existence. Danzo uncovered, I narrowed in deep thought. He pondered over how to convert the QB Jinchuriki over to his cause, even if the chances were slim. A slim chance was better than nothing, though Danzo cursed Hiruzen over in his head for not giving him the QB Jinchuriki sooner. He knew he should have kidnapped the blonde when he was an infant and blame it on another shinobi village. Danzo sighed. This would take careful planning. Gaara gave an annoyed grunt as he continued to sign another sheet of paperwork. Honestly, he didn't know why other Kages made such a big deal out of paperwork, though considering he has never slept a day in his life, paperwork must be a breeze for him, as he could continue signing these documents even throughout the entire night. He frowned once again when he caught sight of another funding request by a villager who was hoping to create a new planting business in the village. This has been going on for the past few days. A villager would have a request for a whole new business that they would like to open up, however they needed the proper funds. Gaara sighed as he marked it as declined. Money was scarce here in the desert. True that ever since the whole invasion of Konoha fiasco, their daimyo has been giving their missions back. However, that still didn't excuse the years of funding they lost because of their daimyo actions. As of now, Suna was still recovering the lost funds they lost after the Konoha invasion. As such, most of the money was going towards the entire village as a whole. They didn't have enough money as it was to actually fund new businesses until they had more funds. And at the pace they were going would take at least several more months. Even though the village's jonin and chunin teams were going in and out of the village going on high-ranking missions, bring back an impressive sum of money, it still wasn't enough to help them recover financially. As moved to grab another sheet of paper, a slender hand had already picked it up and began to examine it. "Gaara-kun, if you keep working in this office doing this paperwork, I'm going to think you don't want to spend time with me." A female voice whined with a pout evident in her voice. Gaara let a small smile reach his face as he stared at the female in front of him. Long waist-length black hair gently flowing down her back like a smooth river. Orange-colored eyes with slightly slitted pupil, curved eyelashes. Several bangs swaying messily yet cutely into her eyes. 2 long bangs framing her face and stopping at her. She wore a black shirt with a dark blue unzipped jacket over it. Black pants with red streaks running down the middle of them. Black sandals with dark blue socks. A sheathed short sword at her side, and finally multiple pouches held together around her waist with a red sash holding them in place. However, what would really catch someone's attention was a large bat, like wings she had on her back, and the slightly hooked nails she had. This female was named Yui, a succubus. Gaara had met her on one of his assignments before he became the Kazekage of Suna. He found her incredibly injured, and out of compassion and curiosity he helped her, and cared to her injuries until she was healed. During the time he tended to her injuries, she awoke, and watched curiously as Gaara tended to her injuries. When Gaara was done, she asked why he helped her, and treated her injuries considering she was succubus. Gaara merely told her that if he had the power to save someone, whatever race they be, then he'll take it, regardless of who they were and their past or race. After all, after his fight with Naruto, Gaara firmly believed in second chances. Hearing Gaara's answer swayed something inside Yui, and so she decided to hang around with Gaara. At first, the villagers of Suna were wary of the female succubus, but slowly warmed up to her. as they noticed that she wasn't as bloodthirsty and violent as they thought her to be. Soon the villagers got used to her constant presence and treated her like they would any other villager. During their time together, Gaara enjoyed both Yui's company and presence. Soon the two were almost always seen together, which Gaara's siblings teased him mercilessly about. Yui was slowly but surely falling for the Ichibi Jinchuriki, and after a year she confessed her love for the redhead. Gaara merely blinked, and said he wasn't that experienced with relationships, and said that she may have to get used to the fact that he may get confused on several things surrounding relationships. Yui merely waved him off and said it was no problem to her. Since then the two have been on many dates, much to the ire of Gaara's new fangirls. When Gaara became Kazekage, Yui immediately embraced him and excitedly yelled how it was amazing that he got such a position. Since then they spent most of their time in the office, as there was no Kazekage for at least 2 years and a half. As such, the paperwork was really piling up. However, with both Gaara's and Yui's combined efforts, they managed to amount of paperwork by a large amount. Yui spent her time helping Gaara mark, file, organize, and transfer the paperwork. Gaara at one point thanked her for the help she was giving him, but she waved him off and said she was happy being able to help him with his workload. I apologize if I am spending too much time in the office, but I was under the impression that you were asleep. Or were you just pretending to be asleep so you could get a break? Gaara asked, his eyes glinting in amusement. Yui pouted at her boyfriend before she playfully slapped him on the arm. Oh, hush you. You act like I haven't seen you trying to fake being sick to get out of the paperwork for at least a couple hours. She huffed. Her eyes glinted in amusement, however, when she saw the surprised expression on her face. Gaara, however, quickly regained his composure. I have no idea of what you speak of, Yui. Gaara said, feigning ignorance. Yui gave a small snort at Gaara's obvious attempt to cover up his tracks. However, she won't let him get off that easily. Oh, really? What about the time when you pretended to have a heart attack after your 3rd day of being Kazekage? She asked, raising an eyebrow in feigned confusion and amusement. Gaara slightly choked on his own spit, before he glared playfully at the succubus. What is on the form you're holding? Is it another request for funds? Gaara questioned, wanting to change the subject. Yui playfully winked. She knew she won that little argument. Whenever Gaara knew he couldn't win an argument with her, he would change the subject in order to save some of his pride. Wasn't a request for funds. It was a mission request for a noble gentleman to escort him back into his homestead. Back in the land of springs, she answered. Gaara nodded. I take you approved it then. Gaara stated. Yui gave him a playful huff, of course. I understand full well that Suna needs whatever funds we can get our hands on. She flicked her hair as she spoke, making sure Gaara had full view of her backside, before she moved towards a window. Man, we've been in this office for what? A whole 2 days. She idly asked. Gaara nodded as he continued to work through all of the papers on his desk. He honestly didn't know why all the other Kages complained about this, but he could admit it does get boring rather quickly after a while. He idly wondered what he was going to have for dinner tonight, before he discarded that thought from his mind. He'll think about later. Meanwhile, Yui narrowed her eyes as a strange large white bird came into her vision. She may have not been living in the desert for long, but she knew that white birds at large do not belong in a desert like this. Hey, Gaara. Gaara, hearing the questioning and serious edge in Yui's voice, stopped sorting through his paperwork and turned his attention towards Yui, who was keeping her steely gaze on large white bird. Yes, Yui? Gaara asked, giving Yui a serious and curious gaze. Is there supposed to be large white birds in the desert? Yui asked. Gaara rose a non-existent eyebrow before he stood from his chair and moved over to the window. He looked over at the sky and spotted the large white bird that Yui was speaking about. His eyes narrowed. He lived in the desert his entire life, and he knew that birds of those type do not exist in the desert. Yui, find Kankuro and Baki and tell them that all shinobi are to mobilize and that their main concern is the safety of civilians. Gaara ordered, his voice giving away none of his emotions. Yui glanced at Gaara, wondering why he would give such an order, before she nodded, and her wings promptly flapped several times before she took to the air and flew out the window. Meanwhile, Gaara calmly and leisurely made his way to the balcony of his office and gave a sharp and impassive glare to the large white flying bird. He narrowed his eyes as he spotted a barely spottable cloaked figure in the night sky of the desert. Sand from around the village slowly began to converge around the young Kazekage. Once the redhead had enough sand, he immediately launched it towards a large white bird, and he bore witness to how the bird dodged the sand, with reflexes that shouldn't even belong to a normal bird. His eyes narrowed once more before he redirected his sand, aiming it towards the back of the bird as it seemed to be carrying someone. The bird dodged once more, but this time Gaara was ready, and he clenched his fist. Seemingly out of nowhere, more sand burst from the ground and surrounded the bird. And once again Gaara clenched his fist. However, the bird dodged at the last second, and it was safely still floating in the sky. However, the figure falling from the bird's position would have better luck. The figure flipped over in midair, so that as he landed, he can land in a kneeling position, just as Gaara expected. The cloaked figure landed in a kneeling position almost as if it were begging to be spared. However, Gaara noted the tense frame the figure held, proving to Gaara that this person, as the cloaked figure stood, Gaara was finally able to get a good look at his opponent. His opponent had long blonde hair tied in a high ponytail. A large bang framed the left side of his face while partly covering it. Gaara was able to catch a glimpse of a metal contraption on his opponent's left eye before his hair covered it away. His opponent carried a pouch on his right side. What that pouch contained, Gaara didn't know. However, what really caught his attention was his opponent's cloak. It was black, with red clouds that had a white outline. Gaara's eyes narrowed, and a scowl formed on his face. Akatsuki has begun to make their move. Gaara's sand swirled slightly, and Gaara shot it a look. The sand stopped swirling. However, it twitched slightly in a threatening manner at the standing Akatsuki member. Gaara knew the reason why his sand swirled. The Ichibi inside him was demanding for the Akatsuki's blood. Gaara's attention was taken from his twitching sand when the Akatsuki member spoke. Yar. I didn't expect to be attacked so soon. Tell me, how did you know to attack me? The blonde Akatsuki member asked. There are no birds like that in this desert, Gaara simply and blankly answered, giving the Akatsuki member an impassive and stoic look. The Akatsuki member smirked. Well, I guess that's true to an extent. Man, what bother? I was kinda hoping to catch you off guard, but I guess that's a bust. The blonde said, giving the Ichibi Jinchuriki another smirk. Where are my manners? My name is Deidara, otherwise known as the Mad Bomber in the Bingo book, Dairata said, giving a mock bow to the stoic Kazekage. Sabaka no Gaara, Gaara said, narrowing his eyes at his opponent. Deidara frowned for a moment before his smirk came back on his face. You're not much of a conversationalist, are ya? But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you are coming with me, the easy way or the hard way. And please, do choose the hard way, Deidara added after an afterthought. Gaara's only answer was a swirl of sand speeding right towards the Akatsuki member. Deidara, with a chakra-enhanced jump, leaped right onto his floating bird, right before it took off at blinding speeds. Gaara, however, wasn't planning on letting the Akatsuki member go so easily. As such, he controlled the sand around him and made it give chase to the blonde bomber. Deidara gave a dark smirk as the Tsunade relentlessly chased him down. Deidara's bird curved and speedily dodged most of the buildings it was about to fly into. Deidara idly noticed he passed a couple of Suna shinobi and a strange girl with bat-like wings on her back before he returned his attention to the sand chasing him down. He glanced to his hands and he noted that they were still in the process of creating his explosive clay. Damn, I need more time, Deidara thought. He was broken from his thoughts as Gaara once again sent another wave of sand towards Deidara. However, Deidara proved to be a stubborn blonde, as he quickly began to dodge all of Gar's attacking sand, even though multiple streams of them were bearing down on him. Gaara felt an urge of frustration as the Akatsuki member kept dodging his sand. His sand was supposed to be inescapable, and yet this member of Akatsuki was proving that to be false. In all of Gaara's life, he has only fought 2 other people whom his sand could never catch. The first was Uchiha Sasuke, one of the last of the Uchiha clan and the former loyal Uchiha of Konoha. The second person was someone Gaara respected greatly, and the young Kazekage considered him to be a very good friend. The thought that there may be other shinobi out there that can dodge his sand was worrying. Gaara was brought out of his musings when he noticed the blonde member of the Akatsuki smirked. He narrowed his eyes and silently made several hand motions, thus moving his sand, speeding directly at the Akatsuki member. The smirking blonde seemed to have smirked even wider, and he promptly mentally ordered his bird to dash to the left. However, Gaara was expecting that, and suddenly more sand burst from the ground and encircled the blonde. The blonde grimaced slightly, and Gaara, feeling a sense of satisfaction, slowly clenched his fist in order to crush the blonde. However, suddenly another smirk crossed the blonde's features. "It's too late, Kazekage-sama," the orator began in a mocking tone. "My clay is finally ready," the blonde finished with a malicious grin. Gaara's eyes narrowed, and he idly wondered what he meant by his clay, but thought nothing of it. He wordlessly ordered his sand to begin crushing the blonde, however. The blonde suddenly threw a handful of small spiders made of clay? The young Kazekage raised a non-existent eyebrow. However, his eyes widened at what happened next. "Art is an explosion. Katsu!" Deidara gleefully yelled. And suddenly the spiders that were latched onto Gaara's sand promptly exploded, sending grains of sand everywhere and creating a large smoke screen. Gaara's eyes widened when out of the smoke came more clay animals such as grasshoppers, spiders, cockroaches, and beetles came flying right at his perch on the balcony. Gaara manipulated the sand inside his gourd to not only give himself a proper defense, but to also lift in the balcony and to the sky. He had enough paperwork to deal with, damn it. He didn't need more paperwork on collateral damage. Deidara smirked as his opponent was now floating inside a large ball of sand in the middle of the sky with a large proportion of the ball missing its sand. Gaara gave Deidara an impassive glare. "So that's the Ichibi Jinchuriki's absolute defense, huh?" the blonde thought. On nothing but pure instinct, Deidara dashed his bird to the left just in time to avoid a blur of sand that nearly went through his head at an intense speed. Deidara cursed as the sand, once again, began to chase him relentlessly around the sky. No matter what he did, the sand would follow him endlessly. And the messed up part was that the sand Gaara was using this time was at least 5 times faster. Deidara only had one thought to sum this all up. What the fuck? Deidara thought, narrowly dodging another strike at the sand. The blonde quickly threw some more of his clay animals, and they began to explode whenever the sand got too close to them. However, the sand proved to be stubborn, as it zigged and zagged all around the clay animals. Deidara kept this up for several moments, before suddenly, more sand from below began to converge and form in the might hand of the Ichibi. Deidara gave an unmanly yelp, as he was forced to rapidly dodge all of the hands made of sand, and the very same sand that had been chasing him for the past 15 minutes. Seriously, what the fuck? Now he has to deal with the madly insane sand that was chasing him and the giant hands of sand. This was just fucking great. However, all of Deidara's rapid movement and dodging failed to actually work, as Gaara's sand soon caught up with him. The sand slowly wrapped around his arm, and Gaara slowly lifted his hand, his facial expression as blank as a brick. Seriously, you would have a better chance of actually trying to read a brick's expression. "Oh, fuck me sideways extra hard," Deidara thought in slight panic as the sand slowly enveloped his arm and began to move to his shoulder. "Oh, no, you're not," the blonde Akatsuki member exclaimed, before he created a large centipede made of clay and ordered it to wrap around. "Art is an explosion," Deidara gleefully exclaimed, before the clay centipede exploded. The explosion stunned the sand. However, it didn't force the sand to let go of his arm, making Deidara frown lightly. Gaara grunted in displeasure before he gave a mental shrug. He was still going to take his opponent's arm, so it didn't really matter. The young Kage slowly clenched his fist, and Deidara gave a small yelp as the sand was constricting. "Sand coffin," Gaara impassively said, clenching his fist tightly. Deidara gave a low groan of pure agony as his entire left arm was devoured by Gaara's sand. Understandably, Deidara was displeased at losing his arm, but at least the young Kazekage didn't take any more than his arms. Deidara didn't think he would be able to take that. Besides, now all he had to do was get that stupid sand in position. Meanwhile, down below, dozens of Suna shinobi with Kankuro, Baki, and Yui were watching the battle. And they were all glad that Gaara had taken the Akatsuki's member's arm. Just as expected of Kazekage-sama, one Suna shinobi shouted, a grin on his face, as the other Suna shinobi cheered. Yui had a shit-eating grin on her face as she stared at the battle. "Yeah, Gaara, kick his ass," the black-haired succubus yelled. Kankuro gave a small smirk as he stared at the sweating Akatsuki member in the sky. "Tay, no one escapes Gaara's sand. That Akatsuki member is toast," he confidently said. Baki merely narrowed his eyes. He knew not to underestimate other opponents. This battle was very much far from over. Meanwhile, back in the airborne battle, Deidara stared at the stump that was once his left arm. That merely left him with a single arm. He idly wondered if he should get Sasori to make him a new one, but he shook himself of such thoughts. He was quickly growing tired of this fight. First, his infiltration didn't go as planned. Then he was forced in a life-or-death battle with the Ichibi Jinchuriki. His supply of clay was running dangerously low. And now he lost his left arm because he seriously underestimated his enemy. Oh, yeah, he definitely wanted to end this battle as soon as possible. With that thought in mind, the blonde member of the Akatsuki began to fly directly at the floating Kazekage, dodging and weaving through every hand of sand attempting to slap him out of the sky. Deidara released a manic grin as he was now close to the Kazekage, and he prepared a bunch of clay animals in his hand. Right before he was suddenly forced to dodge over dozens of kunai trying to strike him out of the sky via Suna shinobi down below. "Oh, hell no!" Deidara thought. "You know dash," Deidara began, as he began to clench and unclench his fist. "I was really hoping they wouldn't get involved in this. But it's their fault for what's going to happen." Here Deidara gave a gleeful and sadistic grin. "Choose Kazekage-sama. Save the village, or continue our battle," the blonde said mockingly, as he unclenched his fist, and a small animal of clay began to float in the center. The animal floated to the center between Gaara and Deidara, and besides, "I am sick and tired of looking at that impassive face of yours," Deidara darkly uttered, before he made a single hand sign, and the small animal suddenly expanded to great sizes, almost as large as the Ichibi. Gaara's eyes widened drastically as he stared at the massive clay animal. Deidara smirked as the clay animal began to descend to the helpless village below. All Suna shinobi try to evacuate as many villagers as possible. I repeat, try to evacuate as many villagers as possible. Baki roared. The Suna shinobi, in a state of panic, readily followed Baki's orders. Yui clenched her fist in rage at the blonde Akatsuki's member's cowardly tactic. "Damn it," Kankuro cursed. Deidara gave a sickening laugh of pure glee as he held his hand in a single hand sign. "Art is an explosion. Katsu!" Deidara gleefully roared, before a massive explosion overtook the skies and ground level. Many Suna shinobi covered their eyes in terror and as an acceptance of their fate. However, the only thing that truly felt different was a large shadow overtaking the sky. In confusion, the shinobi opened their eyes, and as the smoke cleared, they witnessed a sight they thought they would never see. A massive amount of sand was formed just at the moment of impact and placed itself as a shield to take most of the blunt damage and force of the explosion. And the Suna shinobi only knew of one person who had this amazing control of sand. And their assumption was justified as they turned their gaze upon a sweating and panting Gaara. Akatsuki-sama protected us. One shinobi exclaimed. Every single shinobi gazed upon Gaara with shock and awe. Why would he go so far for them? Didn't the Kazekage hate them for how they treated him during his childhood? Meanwhile, Kankuro thought back to the conversation he had with Gaara only several months ago, and the very words Gaara said. I want to be strong just like Naruto. I don't want to fight just to kill anymore. I now understand what made Naruto so strong. Being hateful and casting away your humanity will make you exceptionally powerful. But true strength comes from the heart. I learned this during my fight with Uzumaki Naruto. I learned that by acting like the monster others thought me, as I was only proving them right. As this village's Kazekage, I will defend this village, for it is my home, my family, and where my true strength lies is in my heart. I will defend this village, so that I may hope that this village will love me as well. The redhead said with a smile, Naruto, you truly changed Gaara for the better. Kankuro thought. Yui gave a bright smile as he stared Gaara, giving him a thumbs up when she saw him glancing her way. Gaara allowed himself to have a small smile as he stared at the undamaged village below. Deidara gave a pleased smirk as he stared at the panting Kage. So you managed to save the village, but you're wide open. And Gaara's small smile was replaced with a look of pure shock and surprise as two clay birds flew directly into his face and promptly exploded soon after, startling the Suna shinobi and Yui in the process. Kazunuma, the Suna shinobi yelled in panic. Gaara, Yui, Kankuro, and Baki shouted in surprise and horror. Everyone watched the smokescreen clear with both hope and anticipation. When the smoke cleared, everyone got a full view of the sand that was previously chasing Deidara, had now moved to protect Gaara, encasing Gaara in a fully completed sphere. Deidara frowned for a moment, before a malicious smirk crossed his features. Sorry, Kazekage-sama, but you've lost this battle. Deidara said in a matter-of-fact tone. Inside his defensive sphere, Gaara frowned as he heard his opponent's statement. However, his frown was replaced with a shocked expression as he noticed the sand seemed to be drilled through, and his expression turned to horror when he saw what exactly was drilling through his sand. It was 7 large ants made of clay. Impossible when could he have dash. Gaara was broken from his thoughts when his opponent spoke. It was back when you had my arm encased in your sand. Back then, before you retracted your sand, I planted several of my clay arts inside it. Deidara said smugly, this is where it ends Jinchuriki. Art is an explosion. Katsu! The blonde gleefully exclaimed, before the inside of Gaara's sand promptly exploded. The shinobi down below could only look on in horror as their Kazekage began to rapidly descend from a height that would kill him. Jinchuriki, Kazekage-sama. The shinobi of Sunagakure shouted in both horror and disbelief. Gaara Kun, Yui exclaimed in fear and horror, before her wings began to flap wildly, and she took off into the sky in order to save her red-haired boyfriend. However, just as she was about to reach the red-haired Kage, she was suddenly forced to veer off course as a large bird made of clay flew into her face and promptly exploded. Yui flew out of the smokescreen covered in smoke, and he coughed to get fresh air back into lungs. As she was distracted, however, several grasshoppers of clay latched onto her wings and promptly exploded, gravely damaging her wings. She yelped in pain, and she began to plummet into the cold, harsh ground below. However, before she could go splat on the unforgiving ground, a wall of sand formed below her and wrapped around her protectively and lowered her to the ground as gently as possible. Yui was able to look into Gaara's relieved eyes before the redhead closed his eyes and lost consciousness. That was all the black-haired succubus could see, before the blonde Akatsuki member and his large bird promptly caught the falling Kage. 1 Jinchuriki down. 8 to go. Deidara darkly and smugly stated, a grin crossing his features as he stared at his captive. The shinobi of Suna could only look on helplessly as their Kazekage was being taken right before their eyes. Gaara, Kankuro yelled before he began shoving through the crow of shinobi and pursued the blonde Akatsuki. "Kankuro, wait!" Baki yelled. It was too late, however, as the black-clad brother of Gaara had already began chasing the Akatsuki member and his bird. "Shit!" Baki cursed. "Someone send Black Hawk to Konoha and tell them we need assist immediately. I want every available shinobi to secure the village. Umbu follow Kankuro and assist him in retrieving the Kazekage immediately." Baki roared. "Yes, Baki-sama." The shinobi acknowledged before they went off to perform their respective tasks. Yui, meanwhile, could only stare at the further distancing figure of the Akatsuki's bird with tears pickling at the corner of her eyes. "Damn it," she yelled, punching her fist into the ground. Man-whale in Konoha, inside of Naruto's seal. The mighty and intimidating presence of the Kyuubi no Kitsune stirred slightly before his crimson red and slitted eyes slowly opened. The Kyuubi let out a small sigh. "Shikaka, so they have you now," the Kitsune uttered, sensing his sibling through the empathy link him and the rest of his siblings shared with each other. The empathy link was something all of the Bijus shared. They could feel each other's presence and know if one of them was in the process of being reformed, and if close enough, telepathically speak with each other. Thus Kyuubi was certain that the rest of his siblings knew of the status of Shikaku just like he did. "So they have finally made their move, huh?" Kyuubi gruffly said, clenching his human-like hand. He could not stop the feeling of rage and hatred that crossed his being at the thought of his sibling being beaten, only to be in what the fuck the Akatsuki had planned for him. Despite the fact that Kyuubi acted as if he hated his siblings as well, the truth was that he didn't. They were his siblings. They were his family. It was only natural that he loved them and wished for nothing bad to happen to any of them. The only one of his siblings that could break through his mask was the Hachibi, and the eight-tailed octopus-like ox never revealed the truth to their other siblings. Something Kyuubi was thankful for. "Naruto, wake up. Gaara needs you," Kyuubi muttered, sending a burst of chakra into his container to wake him. Meanwhile, outside of the seal, Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he slowly rose from his bed. He shut his eyes and allowed himself to channel Senjutsu chakra into his body in order to increase his sensing abilities. Then he took a small amount of Kyuubi's chakra to further increase his range. And he reached out towards Gaara's chakra signature. The blonde sensed Gaara's chakra signature, only to find it steady and fluctuating, and he was moving away from his village. Naruto clenched his fists. Fluctuating chakra meant he was heavily injured and was near a critical state. And Naruto knew of only one reason on why he would have fluctuating chakra and be moving away from his village at the same time. "Akatsuki," he lowly growled. He glanced toward Shiroi's sleeping form, and his eyes softened. He leaned down and gave her a small peck on the lips. Then he stood and opened his closet, revealing it to be filled with an assortment of his robes. He promptly picked up a pair of clean robes and placed them on, though not before putting on a dark orange mesh shirt. Then the blonde placed on his black pants and boots. Before he moved over to his other closet across the room, he opened his closet, revealing it to be filled with a vast assortment of his throwing knives, rope darts, his pair of hidden blades, his crossbow, and a quiver of arrows. He quickly placed on all of his weapons. Finally, he moved over to an altar that was also in the room. The altar had a very comfortable and elegant pillow that seemed as if you would fall asleep the second you lay your head on it. However, Naruto was far more interested in the sword that was on the altar. The eagle head for its pommel, the eagle wings it held for a guard, the handle that was covered in soft, smooth leather. The blade was currently sheathed in its customary black leather sheath. However, it wouldn't be for long. Naruto delicately picked up the blade and unsheathed a small portion of it. "Altair, are you ready as well?" the whiskered-faced blonde asked. Altair pulsed an affirmative at his wielder. "Good, but first we have to speak with the Hokage," Naruto stated, his voice serious and cold. He sheathed Altair once the blade pulsed another agreement. He silently opened the window and looked back to Shiroi's sleeping form. He debated on whether or not to wake her, before he decided to let her sleep a little while longer. He silently created a clone and instructed it to make breakfast for Shiroi, as she would wake up at exactly 7 o'clock. He looked towards the night sky, only to see a soft hue of light over the horizon. Morning was coming soon, meaning it wouldn't be much longer when Shiroi wakes. He silently places it over his head, opened the window, and promptly jumped out of his residence. His destination, the Hokage Tower. He had to speak with Tsunade, and he had to tell her, the red clouds have made their move. With every step away from the familiar, Naruto ventures deeper into the unknown. What challenges and surprises await him beyond the horizon? Will love be the anchor that grounds him, or the force that propels him further? Stay with us on Anime T23 for the next exciting chapter in Naruto's journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.